Chapter 267. With the disappearance of the thunderclouds, the sky gradually returned to clear, the scorching sun shone from the ninth heaven, and the whole earth was bathed in this gentle luster. Everything was recovering, showing signs of prosperity, but there were exceptions. Sasuke stared fiercely at Dustless, his sharp eyes were like knives. For the sudden appearance of Dustless, he couldn't wait to cut him into pieces, but strangely, his ferocious eyes seemed to be grateful. Is this kid's brain short-circuited by Dustless-sama's anger? Haku looked at Sasuke's sudden change in expression and couldn't help but be speechless. This change in mood was too exaggerated. Just now he was gnashing his teeth and wanted to drink his blood and eat his flesh. But now, his eyes were filled with gratitude. The speed of his face change was really unacceptable. Most likely. Black Zetsu stared at Sasuke, whose face was as usual in an instant, and sighed that Sasuke's face changed too fast. It's not what a human should look like. Before he was still a mortal enemy, but now he's full of gratitude. This kid. Dustless also looked at Sasuke curiously. This kid's instantaneous change was like coming back from the dead. Sasuke, who was still lifeless and full of despair, was now resurrected with full blood. Especially Sasuke's appearance, full of vitality, gave people the feeling that there was no difference between a cocoon and a rebirth. This isn't the legendary second male protagonist aura outbreak? What kind of shit is this? The corner of his mouth twitched. Dustless was extremely speechless. He secretly slandered in his heart, staring at the reborn Sasuke, and at the same time, there was a flash of light in his mind. I don't know if there will be a most powerful villain aura to resurrect me with full blood when I'm about to die. Second male protagonist aura? Hearing this strange word for the first time in his life, Black Zetsu looked at Dustless with curiosity, and said with great surprise, "Is this Sasuke's rebirth jutsu? I didn't expect there to be such a magical ninjutsu in the world. This unheard-of technique is indeed miraculous." White Zetsu also nodded in agreement. Although he didn't know what kind of mysterious ninjutsu it was, the jutsu that could bring Sasuke back to life must be very powerful. Dustless glanced at Ju. This was a common phrase in the 3D world. Naturally, the natives of the 2D world would not understand it, turning sadness into motivation. This is too illogical. Staring at Sasuke, Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Although his purpose was to make Sasuke stronger, and now Sasuke is becoming stronger as Dustless thought, but dark mode is becoming stronger just like Uzumaki Nagato and Obito, not like this. It's all thanks to you that I can see myself more clearly. As if seeing Dustless's confusion and entanglement, Sasuke had a smile on his face, but it was still as gloomy and indifferent as before. It was because of Dustless's sudden disruption that Sasuke realized that he was so fragile that he lost his goal in the darkness and stayed in the dark space forever. However, there is a saying that things will move in the opposite direction when they reach an extreme. Perhaps it was because of Dustless and Itachi's continuous pressure that Sasuke had a complete mental breakdown. It stands to reason that the people who have a mental breakdown should become walking dead. It's a miracle that Uchiha Sasuke can break out of the cocoon and be reborn. This kid's willpower is really strong. Shaking his head, Dustless's thousands of doubts in his heart suddenly disappeared, attributing this to Sasuke's perseverance. Although he was very uncomfortable with this kid, there is no doubt that his will is really strong. In other words, Sasuke can now correctly understand his past, which is the curse left by Itachi for him. But it's ridiculous to think that you can get rid of the shackles of fate and escape the curse of Uchiha's fate. Sasuke, it seems that I need to give you a more profound memory. I must leave a deeper mark in your heart that is difficult to erase. After that, Dustless's eyes rotated sharply, revealing the Scarlet Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. The surging evil eye power was like a black hole in the Milky Way, swirling with irresistible force. What a strong eye power. Feeling that he was about to be swallowed by the dark power, and the whole person seemed to be swallowed by the violent eye power, Sasuke suddenly became confused, and without hesitation he took the Kusanagi sword and stabbed his calf. Puchi. Ruddy blood flowed down his calf, soaking the ground and penetrating into the ground, dyeing the soil purple-red. Sasuke, who was in a trance, regained his clarity and looked at Dustless coldly. His expression was particularly firm and unshakable. You are decisive and ruthless. Dustless frowned and followed his line of sight. He could clearly see Sasuke's pale face with sweat on his forehead. He looked like an old man in his twilight years who was about to fall down with a push. Sasuke is indeed a ruthless hero, indifferent to the enemy and even more ruthless to himself. Both Black Zetsu and White Zetsu nodded in agreement with Dustless's statement. Looking around, they saw that Sasuke's calf had been penetrated by the Kusanagi sword, and the person holding the sword was indeed himself. It was also because of the unprecedented pain that he could get rid of the shackles of Dustless's Sharingan. But Dustless Uchiha is really a monster. He didn't use any jutsu just now. Just the evil of Sharingan made Sasuke hallucinate. Black Zetsu secretly thought his heart was unusually heavy. Over the years, while he and White Zetsu carried out missions, they also secretly spied on Dustless's strength. However, every time he just moved a little and killed the enemy, he never used his full strength. I will let you relive the old scenes of the past, and remember the past suffering. The corner of his mouth suddenly swept a strange smile. The eternal Manjikyu Sharingan of the pentagram twisted rapidly, and it was countless times more powerful than the previous evil eye power. Sasuke instinctively felt that something was wrong, and when he was about to close his eyes, it was indeed too late. Tsukuyomi. As Dustless's magical voice sounded, Sasuke's vision suddenly became empty, and his eyes became gray. He fell to the ground as if he was facing an unprecedented horror scene. His face was full of fear and his mouth was foaming. You think you can get rid of the script I wrote for you and become the only transcendence to break the shackles of fate? I really don't know where your confidence comes from. Who do you think is the one who dominated your life? Looking at the fainted Sasuke, Dustless raised his eyelids and cast a pitiful look at Sasuke. The tragedy of who was crushed to death by the wheel of fate could be imagined. Without hesitation, Dustless resolutely turned back. As he was about to step away, a disgusting hiss suddenly sounded. Dustless quickly turned his head and directly threw Amaterasu without any mercy. Bastard, since this kid is your enemy, what's wrong with letting me devour him? In the midst of the black flames, there was a miserable shriek. Everyone's attention was focused on the source of the shriek. What came into view was a gigantic white snake with a foul stench all over its body. There was also some unknown liquid around it. Regardless of its smell or appearance, it was the type that made people want to vomit. In the whole world, only Orochimaru can dress like this. It's still as disgusting as ever, whether it's its appearance, actions, or the way of jutsu. It's so ugly that people can't look at it anymore. Looking at the giant serpent, White Zetsu had goosebumps all over his body and said with a chill, "You don't seem to be qualified to talk about others. Compared to you who eats corpses, Orochimaru is much kinder." Looking straight at Orochimaru's body, White Zetsu remembered White Zetsu who often eats corpses, and Black Zetsu couldn't help but make fun of him. Orochimaru won't eat useless corpses anyway. But my means are much more harmonious than his, and at most it's just recycling waste. Like a cat whose tail was stepped on, White Zetsu roared angrily, and at the same time he scolded Black Zetsu. Orochimaru's body, that is, the white phosphor serpent, was swallowed by the black ghost fire, and the blazing fire that couldn't be extinguished made him feel pain. Answer me, Wuchin. Even if this brat is your younger brother, he's just a useless trash to you. If you want to, you can cultivate someone better than him. Why do you have to stop me? Don't tell me that you still have the ridiculous feelings between brothers in your heart. Orochimaru's hysterical screams made people's scalp numb, and a foul smell blew in their face. The disgusting smell made people dizzy. It's no wonder that Orochimaru was so crazy. Since Dustless hated Sasuke so much, there was no reason not to let him devour him. Dustless smiled slightly when he saw this, and high-density chakra floated on the surface of his body, and covered him like an air cover, easily avoiding the disgusting smell. The reason is very simple, Orochimaru. His eyes were long, and he looked at Orochimaru who was in pain with no expression. Because the Amaterasu fire was too hot, he could smell the stench of barbecue. Even Zetsu couldn't help but feel his lungs churning, and he drilled into the depths of the ground to separate himself from this strange smell. Look at how many years you haven't taken a bath, how disgusting the smell on your body is. Even Zetsu, who specializes in corpses, is disgusted. Dustless chuckled, and his tone directly made Orochimaru vomit blood. Chapter 268. Orochimaru's eyes suddenly became ferocious, and even the ghost fire Amaterasu on his body was selectively forgotten. Everyone pays attention to dignity and face. Although snakes don't need these, Orochimaru's essence is still human. Even Zetsu, a monster who eats corpses every day, dislikes him and even despises him. How can Orochimaru not be angry? The snake eyes rolled and stared at Dustless. Orochimaru's eyes were full of hysterical madness. Who are you showing this ferocious look to? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Looking at the angry Orochimaru with a blank expression, Dustless didn't care about provoking him, and the contemptuous smile on the corner of his mouth made Orochimaru have the impulse to tear Dustless into pieces. But this kid can be used. Staring at Sasuke with a cunning look, Orochimaru's huge body twisted, and his disgusting body made Sasuke tremble. The huge body was completely composed of countless wriggling snake heads, and the transparent liquid body was clearly visible. From time to time, many snake heads would raise their heads and spit out snake tongues. The body of Orochimaru's white snake was composed of countless white snakes. No wonder Zetsu, this kind of person who eats corpses, will run away. Dustless's body trembled, and his lungs couldn't help but surge, and there was an urge to vomit. No one can face countless snake heads spitting their tongues at you, and the air was filled with a fishy smell. I'm afraid that even Tetsuo can't maintain a normal expression. Boom. Just as he was about to completely destroy Orochimaru, his majestic large body suddenly burst open, and the scattered small snakes quickly fled, abandoning the original body to escape. The idea is good, but it's still useless. Dustless just smiled softly when he saw this, and the still burning Orochimaru's shell had turned into a snake skin full of texture, and countless white snakes on the ground hurriedly scattered. Orochi's body substitution jutsu can be used to shed skin to defend against Amaterasu's fire. Every white one was actually a clone of Orochimaru. As long as any of them escaped, they could make a comeback. It was not difficult to see how deep Orochimaru's mind was, especially when it came to extending his lifespan and saving his life. Amaterasu is a fire that can devour everything. It's the strongest physical attack. Even billions of clones can only be destroyed by this black willow, the wisp formation. Dustless remained calm as he watched the countless small white creatures flee. At the same time, his eternal kaleidoscope once again released an evil ripple of eye power. He looked up and saw that the Amaterasu on the burning snakeskin had suddenly become darker and darker. The fire was abnormally fierce, shooting straight into the sky and spreading wildly in all directions, engulfing the entire ground. In the blink of an eye, a cage made of Amaterasu was formed. What a rare ability! Zu once again emerged from the depths of the ground. She secretly clicked her tongue as she stared at the flame cage. This ability to control Amaterasu's form was extremely rare, but at the same time, it was also extremely dangerous. Could be used for both defense and attack at the same time. Unbeknownst to her, there was a more terrifying scene happening inside the dark flame cage. Dense black raindrops fell from the sky, like a rainstorm falling on the ground. A large number of white snakes were all burned to death. They didn't even have time to scream before they were annihilated directly. The place where Sasuke fainted was intact, like a second world, and the black raindrops naturally avoided it. In this way, that durable snake has finally died of old age. White Zetsu breathed a sigh of relief. Over the years, he didn't pay attention to Orochimaru's situation. He was already numb to this stinky, hard, and unkillable king of snakes. Who knows? Dustless retracted his gaze from the dark flame cage. He wasn't as optimistic as White Zetsu and gave an ambiguous answer. Through his powerful eye power, Dustless could clearly see the changes in Amaterasu's cage. Most of the white snakes were burned to death by Amaterasu, but there were still some fish that escaped the net, and one of them drilled into Uchiha Sasuke's body. Fortune and misfortune are interdependent, whether you live or die depends on fate. Seeing this, Dustless didn't say much. As for pulling out the white snake that entered Sasuke's body, it was even more impossible, and he had no interest in that. Zetsu, what about Sasori and Deidara? The huge perception spread out, taking in the situation within a radius of tens of kilometers. Dustless frowned and said, Deidara is fine, but Sasori's chakra seems to have disappeared. Was it killed? The eyes of the ancient well surged with unchanging ripples. Dustless's momentum was cold. Even if they had been in the same organization for several years, he didn't show the slightest emotion. It seems that there is still a weak chakra, but it won't last long. White Zetsu's face was expressionless, and there was no emotion in his heart. He had already guessed what Dustless was going to do. Black Zetsu also bowed his head in silence. After thousands of years of dormancy, he had witnessed too many life and death, and he had also thoroughly seen through the ugliness of human nature. Dustless was going to kill Sasori of the Red Sand himself. The previous 4 Purple Flames formation had been completely destroyed, and Deidara and Sasori had also escaped. Although the Edo Tensei army was destroyed by these two uncles countless times, it was still restored countless times. Sasori and Deidara had no advantage at all. Moreover, both of them had suffered extremely serious injuries. Deidara was fine. He rode the giant bird formed by the explosive clay and flew away, but Sasori, who was unable to move, was naturally unlucky. Yes, he has no value of existence. If I kill him myself, I can rest in peace in the underworld. Looking up at the distant sky, Dustless caught the figure who was fleeing in embarrassment, and his eyes flashed with a sinister light. As for Deidara, Dustless selectively let him go. Although Deidara's arms have now been crushed, as long as Kakuzu sews his arms back, he can still lose them, and Sasori has indeed become a pile of scrap metal. Chapter 269. The green grassland stretched as far as the eye could see, like a green gem permanently inlaid in the earth. It was beautiful, and the aura of nature was blowing on the face, making people feel relaxed and happy. In such a situation, anyone would feel sluggish and their mind would relax. Under the shade of the green tree, a red-haired young boy could be clearly seen. Bastard, damn Orochimaru, next time I will tear you to pieces, and that Kabuto who dared to plot against me. The red-haired boy's face was ferocious, and he cursed fiercely. His eyes were red and terrifying. Looking closely, the red-haired young boy was handsome, but his face was full of hostility, revealing a cold, murderous aura, and his body was torn to pieces. However, the strange thing was that there was no blood stain on the torn wounds of the young boy. His body was deformed and twisted like plastic and steel, and the black trench coat embroidered with red clouds was torn apart, so that his chest was exposed. Naturally, it was Sasori. Most of the puppets have been destroyed. How big is the world? Where is there a place for me? A desolate sigh came from Sasori's mouth, and there was a rare color of confusion in his eyes. He knew that the Akatsuki organization can no longer go back. That cruel organization is a place that pays attention to strength. Now that most of Sasori's puppets have been destroyed, there is no need to go back. They will be directly abandoned. Damn Kabuto and Orochimaru, today's hatred. I swear I won't be a man if I don't take revenge. Thinking of the initiators, Orochimaru and Kabuto, Sasori suddenly became angry, his fists clenched tightly, and he couldn't wait to tear the two of them to pieces to vent the hatred in his heart. The number of Edo Tensei army is too dense, and most of them are strong, including some Kage-level powerhouses of some ninja villages. He and Deidara can't do anything alone. Although they destroyed the opponent's puppets countless times, the Edo Tensei still perfectly repaired them. In addition, there is also an inexhaustible supply of chakra. The next few years will be peaceful. Looking at the void in front of him indifferently, Sasori sighed helplessly. 80% of his precious puppets were destroyed, including his body, which suffered great damage. Although many of the puppets could be repaired and used again, his trump card had been destroyed. He had to kill more experts to replenish the puppets he lacked. Speaking of experts, a thin figure involuntarily appeared in Scorpion's pupils. The figure reflected in Kuroto's pupils was obvious. He had messy dark hair, his eyes were bright like stars, his figure was thin and he wasn't too tall, but he had an indescribable aura. Looking carefully, it was Uchiha Dustless. If I can get him? On second thought, Scorpion's blazing eyes dimmed. This was not realistic. The stronger the person was when they were alive, the more powerful the puppet would be. Especially for a top expert like Dustless, Scorpion was 100% sure that he could make the strongest puppet in the world. If there's a strong corpse like Uchiha Dustless, the situation doesn't look good, Scorpion. An indifferent and calm voice sounded like a ghost. When Scorpion raised his head to take a look, he was surprised to see two tall figures. Like Scorpion, they were wearing black windbreaker embroidered with red clouds. There was no doubt that the people who came were naturally Dustless and Zetsu. Frowning, Scorpion asked in confusion, "Why are you two here?" "Of course, we're here to recover the most important thing." White Zetsu's face was full of banter and ridicule. Half of his face was faintly smiling like a cat playing with a mouse. "Sorry, Deidara and I fell into the trap." The news of Nibi's Jinchuriki was a trap. Thinking of the painful experience of being besieged before, Scorpion couldn't help but say with hatred, thinking that Dustless and Zetsu's target was Nibi. "Don't worry, the fox will show its tail sooner or later." Dustless's heart was calm, indicating that Scorpion wasn't worried. As long as the tailed beast didn't die, everything else was fine. As for where it was hiding, it would be exposed sooner or later with the passage of time. Scorpion just nodded when he heard the words. After he was about to ask Dustless about Deidara's situation, the latter's voice suddenly sounded, especially the topic of discussion, which made Scorpion stunned. "Do you want to become an eternal art, Scorpion?" Looking at Scorpion indifferently, Dustless suddenly said in a tone that made people feel like it was a fantasy story. Scorpion stared at Dustless in surprise. To be honest, he didn't think that Dustless had the so-called artistic cells, but he had quite a lot of murderous and bloodthirsty cells. My art is the pursuit of eternity. When talking about art, Scorpion's slightly decadent expression began to brighten up. Even if Dustless didn't understand what art was, Scorpion was still a very distinguished audience. Dustless didn't give Scorpion a chance to speak freely and interrupted him immediately. That is to say, you also want to become an eternal existence. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and looked at the ring on Scorpion's hand vaguely. Wuxia asked calmly. His imposing manner suddenly converged. He was like a cannonball that was ready to be fired, giving people a feeling of extreme danger. Of course, my art is the pursuit of eternity, and I am no exception. Looking at Dustless in puzzlement, Scorpion nodded and answered seriously. That's good, I will make you an eternal existence. Whoosh! A sharp sound broke through the air. Dustless's figure instantly lost its texture and disappeared. The next second, a dark shadow completely covered Scorpion's body. Scorpion stared blankly at the figure that suddenly appeared. What came into his eyes was Dustless's indifferent face. There was a cold and direct killing intent in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth were also outlined with a strange and evil smile. Instinctively feeling that something was wrong, Scorpion quickly took a step back. Scorpion's eyes were round, and his face was full of surprise. He didn't know when Dustless had grabbed his arm. That terrifying force was like being pressed by a mountain weighing tens of thousands of tons, and he couldn't break free at all. Farewell, Scorpion. The strange smile at the corners of his mouth suddenly froze and turned into endless killing intent. Dustless's right arm suddenly exerted force. Pucci. Scorpion's arm was directly torn off by Dustless's brute force, and the powerful force even almost tore his shoulder, but what was incredible was that there was no blood stain on the torn wound, and the inside of the wound was completely like a screw of steel. What do you mean by this, Uchiha Dustless? After quickly retreating, Scorpion roared at Dustless with a murderous intent. Staring at Dustless with a pale face, Scorpion's murderous intent spread out like a tide. Zetsu. Throwing the removed arm to Zetsu, Dustless smiled at Scorpion and said, What do I mean? Don't you know what I mean by now? Of course I am going to kill you. Shrugging lazily, Dustless said indifferently, The organization no longer needs a waste like you, so naturally, I have to make you shut up in advance. Otherwise you may be the next Orochimaru. Also, the ring you are wearing will also be taken back. All of Scorpion's puppets have been destroyed, and even his body has been damaged, and now because Dustless forcibly tore off an arm, he is even more fragile. Do you know what to take back now? Taking off the ring on the arm of the puppet easily, and shaking the previous ring at Scorpion, Zetsu smiled and said, You no longer have the ability to exist in the organization, so the things on your body must be taken out. Did Pain order you to do this? He really is his loyal lackey. Staring fiercely at Dustless and Zetsu, Scorpion roared hysterically, feeling betrayed and ruthlessly abandoned. That waste wants to order us, he is just a puppet pushed to the forefront. Black Zetsu looked at Sasori mockingly, mercilessly despising him, and sneered, Seeing how much effort you put into the organization, I will reluctantly tell you that Uzumaki Nagato is Pain, and he is also a clown. That is to say, the person behind the scenes is you, Uchiha Dustless. Glaring at the indifferent Dustless, Sasori of the Red Sand asked with uncertainty, What about Deidara? Was he also killed by you? Resisting the thousands of anger in his heart, Scorpion screamed and glared at Dustless. Don't worry, after squeezing out the last value of him, if he doesn't die, I will take care of him myself. Of course, it is the best result if he can be killed. Looking at Scorpion's eyes, Dustless said softly, Most of you are people who wander between good and evil. You can step into the world of evil, but you can also turn back and start anew. I really can't trust you. In short, Akatsuki is a tool I use to catch tailed beasts. Since tailed beasts are about to gather, your death is the final destination. Dustless's momentum rose to the limit and he said bluntly. What's more, Dustless doesn't think that Scorpion joined Akatsuki without a purpose. Scorpion is a puppet master who pursues eternity. Making powerful puppets requires powerful corpses. Akatsuki is a super organization where monsters gather naturally. It is also the best place to make the strongest puppets. In other words, every member of Akatsuki has different purposes. In some ways, they are the most trustworthy group of people but also the least trustworthy. You are an existence who pursues eternity, Scorpion. In that case you should thank me. Ignoring Sasori, whose face was blue and purple, Dustless smiled and said, Just like the group of people who died before after you die, you will also become an existence like Edo Tensei, which is the eternal immortality you said. Chapter 270. Wu Qin stared at Scorpion expressionlessly with bloodthirsty luster in his eyes, just like a beast that was about to devour a human. The hidden light made Scorpion's hair stand on end and he involuntarily stepped back. It was the first time in years that he had such an emotion as fear. Damn it, I don't have any strength to resist his attack now. Am I just going to sit here and wait for death? Sasori stared at Dustless in despair, and his heart was full of unwillingness. He was killed by his own people in such an obscure way. It can't be described as aggrieved, it's extremely sad. Such a death is the most ironic end for him. You still want to resist, what can you do in your current state, Sasori? Staring at Sasori calmly, Dustless said faintly, your road is only death, so is the future of Akatsuki, so is Deidara, and so is pain. Sasori naturally joined Akatsuki for a purpose. According to Dustless's guess, it should be to plot the body of the strong. After all, the puppets made by these people are strong enough. It's funny that you are afraid as a puppet. But I'm sorry, goodbye, Sasori. Rich golden photons gathered in the palm of his hand and quickly compressed and condensed. The slender golden sword was obvious. The sword was sharp, and the dazzling luster was enough to destroy and cut everything. Kusanagi sword. What a sharp artifact. Black Zu stared at the big sword in Wu Chen's hand in surprise and remembered it in his heart. As the incarnation of Huiji's will, he must remember all the moves of the number one enemy who might be his life and death enemy in the future. Black Setsu always had a feeling that the strongest enemy in the future was not Uchiha Madara, nor Uchiha Obito, but the mysterious character in front of him who has always been like a deep-sea beast. No one knows how strong he is. Those who have seen Dustless's real strength have disappeared, without exception, all of them went to hell. Dustless's entire body glowed with a golden luster. Instantly, his body turned into a stream of light and whizzed out. So fast, this is definitely not some bullshit teleportation technique, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's a space ninjutsu. Black Setsu's eyes rippled as he stared at the streamer, and he was secretly surprised. Although Black Setsu believes in the strength of Otsutsuki Kagaya, if the opponent is Dustless he still has to be cautious. He is even more afraid than Madara. At least he has observed Madara's life and let him live under his own plan. Dustless, on the other hand, was different. From the moment he appeared, he was going against Black Zu's script. Even if there was no change to the plan, there was still a huge difference. Puchi. Looking over, the sharp golden luster pierced through Scorpion's body, killing him in an instant like cutting vegetables, mercilessly cutting him in half. This is the end. As Dustless's voice fell, Scorpion's body suddenly broke into two pieces, and he completely lost his breath. Clean up his body and evacuate. Before Zetsu could react, the light sword in Dustless's hand quickly dissipated, and his body became blurred until he finally disappeared completely between heaven and earth. Is really indifferent, Dustless-sama. White Zetsu watched Dustless disappear and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Looking at Scorpion's body that was brutally divided, he shook his head and walked to Scorpion's side. In the depths of the dark underground, the figure of the ghetto golem could be clearly seen. 10 thick fingers stood on top of it, and in the blink of an eye, it had been 3 days since the previous incident. Scorpion was killed, it's a pity. On the head of Ghetto Mazo, a middle-aged man with orange hair said indifferently. The fluctuations in his voice had no human emotions. Whether it was a pity or not, only God would know. There is no doubt that this person is Pain. Deidara's arm was also twisted. Rinnegan opened and the black lines rippled, looking at Kakuzu. The task of combining Deidara's arm will be handed over to you. He has also served the organization for many years. Even if there is no merit, there is still hard work. His sight then fell on Dustless's body. Pain frowned, and his eyes flashed with suspicion, and immediately seemed to think of something, and the words that were about to come out of his mouth were taken back. The dead are gone, and the road in the future is still looking forward. Today I will introduce a new member to you. Pain's cold voice spread, and the entire dark cave was full of echoes. Everyone's eyes were focused on Pain, and he became the focus of attention in an instant. The requirements to enter Akatsuki were extremely high. Everyone was an S-class rebellious ninja without exception. In other words, if you want to join Akatsuki, you must have the strength to compete with the Kage-level powerhouses of each village. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know who can join this dark organization. I hope it's a dramatic character who can relieve this heavy and oppressive atmosphere. Kisame said with a smile, and his eyes were full of expectation. It seemed that he was quite curious about the new member that he had never met before. The smile on his shark face was particularly scary. I hope so. Haydn curled his lips, and his face was full of suspicion. Obviously he had doubts about this newcomer. Wu Chen's face was full of indifference, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. He squinted his eyes, occasionally revealing a sharp light. He stared at the figure hidden in the darkness, and his eyes flashed with understanding. Dustless, who was in an excellent situation, could clearly see the other person's figure, wearing an orange spiral mask, only showing the eyes, wearing a black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, airtight. Sure enough, it's you. Uchiha Obito. No, I should call you hoodlum now. Staring at the dark shadow that was isolated from the world in the depth of the darkness, Wu Chen's mouth curved into a meaningful smile. After looking at him deeply, Wu Chen closed his eyes calmly and started to daydream. Chapter 271. Uchiha Obito, now known as Hoodlum, joined the Akatsuki shortly after Sasori's death. On the surface he was Daidara's partner, but in fact he was the real existence of the Akatsuki behind the scenes, and it can be said that he was one of the biggest black hands. Ta-ta-ta. The sound of footsteps came out from the darkness. The cheerful footsteps were like a child jumping around, very happy, but it gave people a feeling that he hadn't grown up yet. Soon an unidentified man wearing a spiral mask came into view, although because of the mask his appearance couldn't be seen. Judging from his figure, he was a middle-aged man. Everyone's eyes were cast over, including Dustless, curiously looking at the masked man. Oh, don't stare at me like that, I will be shy. It seemed that he couldn't stand this particularly oppressive environment. Uchiha Obito, who was covered by the mask, suddenly chuckled. The sound of a brainless idiot made everyone stunned, and after looking at each other, they could see the speechlessness in each other's eyes. This kid in front of them seemed to come out for a comedy performance. The most embarrassing thing was that the masked man seemed to feel that it wasn't enough, and deliberately stroked his hair coquettishly, and danced around a few times under everyone's gaze. This guy didn't come out for a joke, right? Or is he a comedian deliberately invited by the leader? The current oppressive atmosphere in the entertainment organization. Dedale's old face suddenly turned black, as ugly as a black pot. The corners of his mouth kept twitching. He suddenly felt that teaming up with Scorpion in the past was the happiest time because this guy in front of him seemed to be the type who was lacking a string in his brain. He's like a comedian, but it's very to my taste. Oh hello, I'm Kisame. Kisame smiled at the masked man and first greeted him. His shark face squeezed out a creepy smile, although it seemed to be a simple greeting, but there was always a feeling of eating people. Senpai, don't eat me, my thin arms and legs are not enough to fill the gap between your teeth. The masked man covered his face with his hands as if he had seen a terrifying creature that he had never seen before. He seemed to be scared silly as he retreated. Why didn't I see this kid like this when he was with me before? Wu Chen's mouth twitched without a trace. He looked at the masked man, Obito, and slandered him in his heart. Although he knew that during the mission with Dead Ale, the masked man's performance was so strange, he couldn't help but sweat for Dead Ale. The personalities of these two people didn't seem to belong to the normal category. In other words, there was no one with a normal personality in Akatsuki. Hey. Why is it always this kind of monster that enters the organization? Isn't there anyone normal? At the very least, there's someone as reliable and trustworthy as me. Haydn looked discontentedly at the masked man who was beaming with joy. He suddenly waved the 3-section scythe in his hand. It looked like he wanted to test the strength of this new member again. Is this just my imagination? Even a mere zombie would think that he's worth trusting. As if he had just heard the funniest joke, the Kismet Ghost Shark looked at Fei Duan with ridicule in his eyes. Hearing Ghost Mermaid, Fei Duan coldly glanced at Ghost Mermaid. Knowing that Ghost Mermaid wasn't good at talking, Fei Duan shut his mouth. This kid didn't learn a lesson at all. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry looking at Fei Duan who was carrying the scythe. He couldn't help but be speechless, sighing that this kid was hopeless. When Itachi joined Akatsuki, he had already been taught a lesson by Itachi. Later, when Dustless joined Akatsuki, this kid also challenged Dustless, but he didn't know the ability of Dustless, so he was accidentally injured by Kakuzu. Looking at his appearance now, it was obvious that he was going to teach the masked man a lesson. Wu Chen was silent. He looked at the scene that was about to play out with great interest. His face was filled with curiosity. The other members of Akatsuki looked at the masked man suspiciously. Those who could join Akatsuki were S-level defectors. This kid was weak from head to toe, and he didn't have the slightest prestige of an S-level ninja. Fei Duan coming out to test Obito was also in line with their intention, especially Pain, who was sitting on the head of the Geto Mazo, didn't interfere with the duel. Obviously, he was also looking forward to the performance of the masked man. To some extent, the relationship between Uzumaki Nagato and the masked man was not harmonious. Naturally, he also wanted Fei Duan to test the ability of the masked man to prepare for future emergencies. After all, there are no real friends in this world. Under absolute interests, the enemy who killed your father can sometimes become a friend. It may sound exaggerated, but that's the case. Oh, senpai is really ferocious. Is it really good to bully me like this? The masked man made a look of extreme fear and immediately continued to twist his body. Looking at Dustless, he was annoyed. He secretly cursed Uchiha Obito for being the movie emperor. If he didn't know the identity of this kid in advance, he was afraid that he would have been fooled. However, the ridicule and disdain in the depths of the masked man's eyes was still clearly captured by Dustless. He knew that the masked man was deliberately teasing Fei Duan. Is it really okay for such a guy to exist in the organization? The group of members looked at each other, and they could see the embarrassment and helplessness in each other's eyes. This kid didn't look like a master at all. As Kisame said before, it was obvious that he was here to make fun of the dark atmosphere of the entertainment organization. However, Uchiha Itachi looked at the masked man from the beginning to the end. His eyes were as calm as stagnant water from time to time splashed with ripples, and then immediately calmed down and disappeared. Well, although I don't know why the leader values you, it's impossible for you to join the Akatsuki, an organization with a strict hierarchy. At least let me see how strong you are. After that, Fei Duan rushed up with her scythe. Chapter 272. ZZZ, the scarlet three-section scythe fell on the ground, drawing a long and narrow trace and creating faint sparks. The buzzing sound of steel made the oppressive atmosphere even gloomier. This kid is always so persistent. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, Dustless shook his head helplessly. Then he looked at the scene in front of him. Without even thinking, he could guess that the one who asked for trouble in the end must be Fei Duan. The opponent is Uchiha Obito, a super boss. Soon, the uninterested look on his face changed to, sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Just as Ghost Mermaid said, this dark organization often had some funny entertainment shows, which were not bad and could ease the atmosphere. Senpai is so scary, so scary. The masked man twisted his body coquettishly, and his movements were particularly funny. Every time he was about to fall to the ground, his body would burst out with a wonderful elastic force, making him stand up again, similar to a roly-poly toy. I actually challenged this kind of idiot. Is my brain not enough? Regret appeared on his arrogant face. Haydn couldn't help but secretly think, and secretly scolded himself for being reckless, and also labeled the masked man as incompetent in his heart. Challenging such a person, Haydn will also be treated as an idiot. Fei Dan's gaze quietly spread out, taking in the changes in everyone's expressions. After carefully observing for a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched without leaving a trace. Not to mention the other people's strange expressions for the time being, even his partner Jiao was looking at him with disdain. It has to be said that the strange voice and funny movements did have an unexpected effect, making everyone stare at the masked man with interest and lose their vigilance against him. Cunning enough, he made everyone lose their vigilance as soon as he came. I'm afraid no one would think that the masked man in front of them is the one behind the scenes. Glancing at Obito, Dustless secretly said in his heart. At the same time, the corner of his eyes swept across everyone, and most of them lost their vigilance, with a look of expectation on their faces, watching the wonderful performance that was about to be staged in front of them with interest. Obviously, the performance of the masked man had a decisive effect. Only people like Itachi and Pain maintained indifference and secretly remained vigilant. Hurry up and scram. Dawn isn't a place for trash like you. Waving his hand, Fei Duan also lost interest in fighting. He impatiently ordered the masked man to leave. This kind of trash with less than 5 battle power was not worth his time. It would only cause him to lose face. The masked man in front of him was exceptionally plain and vulgar. There was nothing outstanding about him. The Akatsuki was a gathering of all kinds of monsters with extraordinary strength. If one wanted to stay in the organization, they had to have the same strength. Otherwise they would only be a burden. However, the masked man obviously had no intention of quitting, and his words directly angered Flying Duan. Sorry senior, I don't intend to withdraw from Akatsuki, for the time being. Even if I am not as strong as senior now, I will definitely surpass senior in the future. The masked man no longer had that mischievous smile on his face. He spoke very seriously. The determination in his tone moved everyone deeply. He did not seem to be backing down at all. Everyone looked at him in a new light. Fei Duan's ears were particularly harsh. The masked man was challenging him in disguise, challenging his authority as a big brother. It was simply outrageous. Go to hell, trash. Without waiting for the masked man to react, the three-section scythe in Fei Duan's hand swept up, whistling straight towards the masked man's head. Clang! With the roaring sound of steel, flashing sparks appeared in the dark space. It could be vaguely seen that the masked man used kunai to easily block the scarlet scythe. Bah, good boy, not bad. The strength of thin arms and legs is not small. Feeling the huge force coming from his hand, Fei Duan was stunned, and immediately curled his lips in disdain. He did not expect Obito's strength to be so great. Although he remained calm on the surface, he was extremely shocked in his heart. This boy is definitely not an ordinary person. His strength is not weaker than mine. His eyes narrowed, staring at that unprepossessing mask. Fei Duan's heart was like stormy waves. It was precisely because he was not good at other aspects that he strengthened his body. His strength was absolutely second to none. This boy in front of him deliberately hid his strength. It's really surprising he can actually resist Fei Duan's attack with such a small body, even if the strength just now was less than 50%. That masked man seems not simple. There should be no problem for him to enter Akatsuki. Kakuzu's small green eyes emitted a startled light. He and Fei Duan formed a team to earn extra money all year round. Most of the time it was Fei Duan who understood the opponent, and he was responsible for counting money, so he naturally understood Fei Duan's powerful strength. But now, Obito could easily resist Fei Duan's attack, which also showed that he was not ordinary, although this boy looked a bit sloppy. I really looked down on you before. Fei Duan's contemptuous look gradually converged, and his eyes staring at Obito, he said in a deep voice, but just now it was less than 50% of my strength. Looking at the masked man, Fei Duan's expression quickly tightened, his arm shook, and his strength accelerated. His strong and powerful arm danced, and the powerful force directly threw the masked man out. Bang! Obviously, this force exceeded the limit of what the masked man could bear, and the masked man fell on the rock wall like a cannonball, smashing out a deep pit. In order to join Akatsuki, it must be very difficult. Dustless, who had excellent eyesight, saw at a glance that the blood stain on the corner of the masked man's mouth fell to the ground. Obviously, the masked man could dodge the attack, but he actually asked for trouble. He knew that the masked man deliberately went easy on him. Go to hell for me. However, Fei Duan did not intend to let the masked man go. He quickly ran out, and when he was still several feet away from Obito, he suddenly jumped up as if he wanted to split him in half. Chapter 273. The gigantic black shadow whizzed down, the three sections of the scythe shining with a cold light made people tremble in fear. In the dark night sky, it was like the death god had descended from the sky, the cold light on the scythe cutting through people's souls. In this situation, no matter who it was, they would collapse. However, the masked man's eyes reflected a different sign. The single eye exposed on the mask was as calm as water, motionless like stagnant water. Instead of showing the slightest fear, it was faintly mocking and disdainful. For the masked man, Haydn was indeed just a joke. He was simply using a chess piece and there was no other value. As if the scythe falling from the sky didn't exist, the masked man's breath was calm, like a sculpture, treating the scythe as air, ignoring it. Go to hell. As if sensing the contempt of the masked man, Fei Duan's strength became even more ferocious. Originally he had planned to scare the masked man. After all, everyone had their own way of doing things. This kind of powerless person was not his cup of tea. But the invisible ridicule in his eyes angered him. Whoosh! The cold light came head-on, and it passed through the masked man's body and cut him in half. This guy's ability seems a bit weird. His pupils dilated, and looking at the intact masked man, Haydn's eyes flashed with horror. He just saw the masked man's body being penetrated by himself. Without hesitation, he opened a distance and his hair stood up. Haydn's eyes subconsciously looked at Dustless. This ninjutsu that seems to ignore physical attacks coincides with Dustless's jutsu. At the same time, everyone also realized that something was wrong at that moment. Ignore physical attacks, the same jutsu as Dustless, it doesn't look like it. Pain, who was sitting on the head of the ghetto Mazo, frowned, and his eyes stared at the masked man as if he was looking at a prey. His eyes were sharp like an eagle, and he saw through the essence of the masked man. Although it is the same as Dustless's jutsu that ignores physical attacks, it seems to be a little different. The thoughts in his mind were reversed. Picking up the past Dustless and the masked man, Pain found that there was an essential difference in their existence that ignores physical attacks. Oh, thank you, Senior, for sparing my life. Patting the dust off his butt, the masked man stood up and thanked Fei Duan, who had a pale face. His tone was extremely sincere and did not contain any falsehood. As if nothing had happened just now, the masked man didn't use any ninjutsu to turn into nothingness. Do you think this is the end? Even though the masked man was wearing a mask, Fei Duan could still see the face behind his scarlet eyes that were filled with killing intent. What entered his eyes was the other party's unbridled mockery and contempt. Of course, this was all because of Fei Duan's pride. The show is about to begin. Taking a deep breath, Fei Duan said firmly in a deep voice. Just as he was about to go up and fight with the masked man, Pain's calm voice suppressed him with a majestic voice. That's all for today. From now on Hoodlum will replace Scorpion's position. Looking around, Pain said faintly. His tone was authoritative and no one dared to defy him. As members of the Akatsuki, the most powerful leader in the Akatsuki, no one can ignore his existence. Boy, you're lucky, you better not have a next time, otherwise. With a cold snort, Fei Duan returned to Kakuzu's side silently. These words were extremely radical, which was equivalent to tacitly admitting that Hoodlum joined the Akatsuki. Looking up and looking at the masked man, Deidara was about to complain, but he was stared back by Pain's fierce eyes. Shrinking his neck, the words that were about to come out of his mouth poured back into his heart, and Deidara closed his mouth. It's a good match. Staring at the dancing masked man with a smile, Dustless's pupils suddenly narrowed, and the gaze from his eyes was extremely dangerous. The focus of his gaze was on the masked man. This kid's ability is really troublesome. If we gather all the tailed beasts in the future, will he? Forget it, there is no need to worry about this problem. Shaking his head, Dustless's mouth had a confident smile, and his eyes were shining with a burning brilliance, like the bright stars in the night, which was particularly attractive. Sick. Looking at Dustless, who was proud of himself for no reason, Conan frowned slightly, and her face was slightly cold. She looked at him without understanding, but her words directly made Dustless vomit blood. You have to choose the right time to act up. Staring at Dustless with uncertainty, Conan sneered. Sick? Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely when he heard the words. He looked at Conan gloomily, rolled his eyes and said angrily, sick is also lovesickness. It seemed that he was afraid that Conan didn't understand what he meant, so he added, the object of lovesickness is far away but close at hand. After that, regardless of Conan's state, Dustless simply closed his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind, he was thinking about his own plan. Xiaonan, who came back to her senses, flew into a rage out of humiliation. She glared angrily at Wuxia, who had his eyes closed. Her pretty face was slightly red, and there was a charming dimple on her smooth pretty face. She looked like a ripe honey peach and couldn't help but want to take a bite. Her eyes were burning with flames and she couldn't wait to tear that cheap mouth into pieces. She didn't know what the word reserved meant. Dustless was thinking about other plans in his heart. As long as he trained Uchiha Obito in the system, all problems would be solved. However, if he trained the character in the system, he would be at his peak, which means that Dustless will face the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Obito. The two sides are completely betting on a duel of life and death. Such a dramatic thing as Obito's collapse can't happen in the system. Chapter 274. Under Pain's intervention, it was inevitable that the masked man would enter the Akatsuki. After all, these two people had already passed in advance, and it was impossible to stop them. After all, Pain still had the final say in the current Akatsuki, and no one could challenge his authority. Deidara's face was full of bitterness, looking straight at the masked man who was beaming with joy as if he had eaten honey. He opened his mouth and sighed with emotion. The masked man was a big pit that he had to bear from now on, and it was impossible to get rid of him. In addition, there is one more thing. Ripples surged in Samsara's eyes and Pain's indifferent voice resounded through the void. The traces of second last have not been found so far, and I don't know where that group of people hid her. If there is nothing, don't walk around at will. The enemy is eyeing covetously, and there is no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. Hearing this, Dustless nodded. Recently, the limelight was indeed too tight, and it was not suitable for action. Moreover, the Akatsuki organization was almost in a state of high concentration to do missions during this time. They were either catching tailed beasts or taking on missions to earn extra money. It was really hard. It was time to take a break. It was drizzling in the sky, and the golden color outside the window was very hazy and illusory. Year after year, human beings are really bound in the shackles of time. No wonder Orochimaru would have such thoughts. Staring indifferently at the drizzle outside the window, Dustless's face was full of emotion. Time was endless. No wonder Orochimaru longed for eternal life and explored the truth of time. It was also human nature to chase eternal life. You can even sigh, it's rare, Dustless. The beautiful girl with silver hair walked out from behind, and her small hands wrapped around Dustless's waist. Her beautiful forehead rested on Dustless's head, and her beautiful eyes were also staring at the void in front of her. Even though she was nearly 30 years old, Otsutsuki Higuro still looked delicate and charming. The elegant fragrance rushed into his ears and nose. Dustless looked at the beautiful woman behind him, took her into his arms, and gently covered her seductive red lips. After a long time, their lips parted, and Otsutsuki Higuro looked at Dustless in a trance, intoxicated in the taste of the fusion of water and fire just now. Sigh? Perhaps. But it's true that we should drink and sing in this world. In the end, it's all about being free and unfettered. If it's possible, I also want to wander among the flowers and pluck the world. Io, are you a tiger? Dustless screamed in pain. Feeling the stinging pain from his waist, Dustless grimaced in pain and glared at the angry Otsutsuki Haruo. The tender hand on his waist was Otsutsuki Haruo's warm jade hand. At this moment, it was mercilessly ravaging the tender flesh of his waist. The pain was unbearable. Dustless could only smile bitterly as he sighed inwardly. This woman's face changed faster than flipping a book. She was just enjoying herself a moment ago, but now she had turned into a hag in the blink of an eye. There should be a limit to how arrogant you can get. How dare you boast shamelessly in front of your wife? Next time it won't be such a simple matter, Dustless. She fiercely glanced at Dustless, her beautiful eyes slightly narrowed, and her expression was lazy. The warm embrace was like poison. Otsutsuki Haruo arched her body, changed into a comfortable sleeping position and closed her eyes. Her white and tender arms tightly grasped Dustless's arm for fear that he would slip away. Her jade face was peacefully pillowed on Dustless's arm. Her spotless face was unusually serene and full of enjoyment. The blazing warmth from his chest made her feel very comfortable. She quickly fell asleep like a kitten with a satisfied smile on the corner of her mouth. Hoo-hoo, steady and gentle breathing came out from Yuluo's nose. The rhythmic nasal sound was like the sound of nature and Dustless was addicted to it. You're also one of the strongest, but your sleeping posture is still so idiotic. What if someone kills you with a sneak attack? Looking at the sleeping beauty in his arms, Dustless shook his head helplessly, and then involuntarily scratched her nose. Otsutsuki Haruo wrinkled her nose discontentedly, and her delicate face was frozen, showing slight dissatisfaction, silently protesting. With this unguarded sleeping posture, I'm afraid that ordinary people can easily kill Yuluo, a top powerhouse with Tensigen. Quietly staring at the sleeping beauty, Dustless's mouth outlined a gentle smile, like the winter sun, bright and unusually warm, and a raging flame rose in his indifferent heart. Indifferently looking at the void in front of him, the doubts in Dustless's eyes disappeared, and his eyes were exceptionally clear and sharp. Maybe it's because of this feeling that Uzumaki Naruto is like an unkillable cockroach, getting stronger without limit, from the so-called last place to a peerless hero. Stroking Yuluo's beautiful face, Dustless secretly smiled. Just now he had a violent feeling that as long as someone dared to hurt Yuluo, he would definitely tear them into pieces. Even though Dustless and Yuluo are husband and wife, Dustless didn't have this feeling. Suddenly looking back after getting along with each other for more than 10 years, the patriarch of the Otsutsuki family from the moon has completely stepped into the depths of his heart. What a child. Taking a deep breath, staring at the beautiful woman, Dustless stood up gently for fear of disturbing the sleeping beauty, and carefully carried Yuluo to the bedroom. Dustless secretly swore in his heart, from now on, Otsutsuki Haruo will be the object of his protection. No matter in the future or in the future, anyone who dares to hurt her will be destroyed and sent to the 18th layer of hell, never to be reincarnated. Even if it's a god, there is no exception. After recuperating for a few days, I can train Obito. On the wooden corridor there was a sound of ta-ta-ta. Looking up, it was Dustless holding Luo. The characters in the training system are in the peak state. As for the kind of comedy scene where the opponent collapses, it's impossible to happen. It's only about the confrontation of life and death. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. There is no turning back once you step on the road of death, and if you succeed in the training, you will naturally take everything from the opponent. Chapter 275. Endless starlight dotted the blue void, and the monotonous sky became more vivid, with a little more vitality. At this moment, Dustless was already in the world inside the system. The world inside the system was the same except for the void, which was a little strange. The ground was composed of mountains and rivers, and it was an endless emerald green. Yo, it's been a long time. Ling, you're much more beautiful than before. On the open plain, a gentle breeze blew. Wuxia smiled and stared at the graceful figure in front of him. He said with a playful smile, "If anyone can marry you, I'm afraid he will wake up laughing in his sleep. Of course that includes me." The slender and peerless figure in front of him was clearly visible, like a goddess above the 9th heaven. She was more arrogant and untouchable than Otsutsuki Dustless. Her aura was also much stronger, like the ruler of the sky. The whole sky was crawling under her feet. Heaven and earth were so small, let alone a mere Dustless. This kind of arrogant, powerful and beautiful woman could arouse the desire of countless people to conquer her. "Yes, I haven't seen you for a while. Your strength hasn't improved much, but your eloquence has improved a lot. You're really impressive, Dustless." Linger's delicate face was always cold and detached from the world. She said expressionlessly, turning a deaf ear to Dustless's teasing. "Only you can say that." Dustless smiled bitterly, and his heart was particularly bitter. No matter when he was in front of Linger, he was very small. Dustless often felt like he was in a fantasy. As long as he faced Linger, he would be killed in an instant. "You don't come to the temple without a reason. Say it, who are you going to train with this time?" Seeing through Dustless's purpose at a glance, Linger asked expressionlessly. Dustless came here for training. It was absolutely impossible for him to do anything else. "Don't be so cold. No matter what, we're from the same roots. We're bound together for good or ill." Wuxia smiled embarrassedly. He was rather embarrassed. He also knew that he had neglected Ling all these years. He had completely treated her as a tool. It was indeed a bit unreasonable. He had completely ignored her. Since you know that we are born from the same root, then don't talk nonsense. Your death won't do me any good." Ling coldly glanced at Dustless as she spoke in a resolute tone. Her eyes were cold, clearly unable to accept Dustless's words. Hearing this, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of hesitation. Thinking of Uchiha Obito, his eyes were full of caution. If it was Uchiha Obito in the early stage, Dustless would be fine. However, Uchiha Obito at his peak was a super-dimensional character like the Jinchuriki of the Jubi. If it was just the Jubi, it wouldn't be a big deal, it would just be a simple display of power, but after the Jubi was absorbed by Obito, it meant that the power of the Jubi was also under Obito's control. The difference was like heaven and earth. "You are still afraid? This is funny." Her beautiful eyes widened as she stared at Dustless with interest. Linger's thin lips curled into a contemptuous smile as she said sarcastically, "When you first came to this world, you were not afraid of anything." Staring at Dustless, her wise eyes seemed to see through Dustless's thoughts. Linger's light voice was like the sound of nature as she said elegantly, "It's normal for you to be afraid of a monster like the Jubi. He is indeed not someone you can match," Linger said slowly. "The Jubi has completely exceeded human cognition. The boundless chakra, the immortal body, and all kinds of powerful ninjutsu. Dustless is really not his opponent." "So what?" Frowning, staring at Linger tightly, Dustless asked faintly, "The essence of the sacred tree's existence is to be used. Being used by Otsutsuki Kagaya is one thing, being used by me is another. What's more, I don't think I am worse than her. At least, Kagaya's era has come to an end, and my era is slowly rising. After all, everyone is just a thief. Kagaya can steal the power of the sacred tree. Dustless doesn't think that he can't." "You really dare to say that?" Staring at Dustless's face, Linger said as usual, Obviously she had expected Dustless to say such a thing. She asked indifferently, "Who are you going to train with? And the rules, I don't need to say it. If you want to take everything from the other party, you must kill him completely, and if you are killed you will die completely and there will be no turning back. There is no free lunch in the world and it is the same in the system. If you defeat the system's character you can take everything from him. If you fail the challenge, Dustless himself will also die. In other words, it is a bet of life and death. If you lose, it means that everything will be completely over. Name your character Dustless." Taking a deep breath, Linger, who was transformed by the system's consciousness, asked. Dustless will become any character he chooses to train with, and then the two sides will engage in a cruel battle. Uchiha Obito. With a cold light in the depths of his eyes, Dustless exhaled heavily, and immediately shouted in a deep voice. His tone was sonorous and powerful, and his confidence was unusually firm. "As you wish." As Linger's voice fell, her perfect body suddenly swept out a dazzling white luster, and the suppressed terrifying chakra erupted without warning, raging like a level 10 hurricane. Boom boom boom. Because it couldn't bear the powerful chakra, the ground where Linger was standing before suddenly shattered. It was extremely fragile, as if it was a piece of paper that couldn't withstand a single blow. A giant pit hundreds of meters deep in the ground was clearly visible. What a terrifying chakra wave. His pupils suddenly shrank, Dustless's heart was shocked like a stormy sea. He could clearly perceive that the flowing air around him was directly evaporated into nothingness by the hot chakra and disappeared without a trace. The world was like a steamer, extremely hot, and the whole space was boiling. Chapter 276. Dustless's eyes solidified as he cautiously looked at the figure floating in front of him. He could clearly see 9 mysterious small black spheres floating behind him. His skin turned pale white, and his hair turned silver white. This is the mode of the Jubi's Jinchuriki? It's really oppressive, especially his state is obviously not as complete as Madara's. Even so, it still makes me feel like I can't resist. Staring intently at the Jubi Jinchuriki Obito transformed by Ling, Dustless's heart inevitably fell to the bottom. That fatal oppression made him feel like a bone in his throat, and his breathing was very difficult. Looking around, he saw Obito holding the 6-path staff. 6 black tomo appeared on his chest, and 9 black tomo and the Uzumaki clan emblem on his back. Half of his body was particularly oppressive, like a snake's skin full of scales. Obito faintly looked at Dustless, his face was expressionless. Pretending to be a ghost. Dustless's cautious look quickly disappeared, and his mouth outlined a cold smile. At the same time, his left and right eyes began to change rapidly, and his pupils, one purple and one blue, were soon exposed. The left eye was the Rinnegan and the right eye was the Tensegan. Good eye power. Perceiving the change in Dustless's pupils, Obito nodded slightly, recognizing this opponent, but from the beginning to the end, he still maintained the same indifference, and his eyes were as calm as stagnant water. However, no matter how strong the eye power is, the Jubi's Jinchuriki can only suffer. The two sides are not in the same dimension at all. It's a pity that you still have to die. Raising his eyelids and looking at Dustless with pity, Obito said casually. His tone was not as gloomy and complicated as the Uchiha Obito in the outside world. The Obito in front of him was a special existence created by the system to kill Dustless. It's you who deserves to die, fool. Dustless sneered again and again, his body swept with golden light and went straight into the sky, standing at the top of the void. Although the Jubi's abnormal recovery ability made people blush with shame, it was almost impossible to kill it, but Dustless believed that any creature would die if there was not even a residue left. At the moment he didn't talk nonsense and stared at Obito with murderous intent. A large number of light beams gathered in his palm, and the bright golden light shrouded the whole earth. Looking up at Dustless, Obito frowned, then his eyes fell on the golden light in Dustless's palm and just smiled. Yasukani no Magatama. A dense number of golden light beams poured down, like a swarm of ants, and it was impossible to know how many there were. The scale is huge and the power. Obito's expression remained the same as he looked at the golden light ball roaring towards him without fear. At the same time, the 6-path monk staff in his right hand suddenly pointed towards the sky, and the truth-seeking orb floating behind him swept out. The truth-seeking balls floating above Obito's head suddenly burst and turned into a black circular barrier, burying his whole body under the protection of the truth-seeking balls. Seeing this, Dustless frowned tightly. The Obito in the system was like a bug. He didn't remember that the Obito in the outside world could use the truth-seeking balls so skillfully. Even when Obito didn't completely control the Jubi, the truth-seeking balls he used were incomplete. He directly skipped this important point. The truth-seeking ball is really the most troublesome technique. It is invincible in both offense and defense. It is indeed a technique that only those who have stepped into the realm of gods should use. Looking at the black defensive wall that blocked the dense light beams, Dustless couldn't help but nod in admiration. The truth-seeking ball can create and destroy the world, it is not wrong at all. Soon, Dustless's pupils narrowed, and the light beams emitted from his eyes were unusually dangerous. He stared at the light beams that fell on the defensive wall and were easily bounced off, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a confident smile. Clang, clang, clang. Looking up, he saw that the golden light beams that fell on the truth-seeking ball bounced off like hailstones, and there was no sign of collapse, and the ground around them was like a sieve. What a strange technique. It can be intact after coming in contact with the truth-seeking ball. Inside the truth-seeking ball, Obito frowned and his face was full of doubts. He could feel that these techniques were different, and the truth-seeking ball couldn't erode them at all. It coincides with my conjecture. The glinting fruit doesn't belong to this world. Although the truth-seeking ball can resist the power of the devil fruit, it can't directly collapse it, so. Dustless's face was full of anger, and his eyes were full of killing intent. When he used the elephant shift technique, to seal the Ichibi, Dustless's body couldn't exert the power of the devil fruit, which shows that the power of the devil fruit is fundamentally different. After all, the truth-seeking ball can only nullify ninjutsu, but the glinting fruit doesn't belong to the category of ninjutsu. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, boundless golden light beams roared down, densely packed like a rainstorm, writing its own prelude to destruction. Even if Obito inside the truth-seeking ball was safe and sound, the ground around him was full of holes, and the ground that was intact before had countless holes. This tragic scene lasted for a few minutes before it stopped. Although I don't know what kind of strange ninjutsu this is, it seems to be just SOSO. Perceiving that Dustless's attack stopped, the liquid truth-seeking ball once again returned to its original state, turning into a dark sphere floating behind Obito. Raising his eyes slightly, Obito stared at Dustless in the sky indifferently, and without hesitation, Obito sentenced Dustless to death, and his body also began to float and fly into the sky. The two figures stayed in the sky at the same time, looking at each other indifferently. What a pity, Obito. Looking directly at Obito with a smile, Dustless grinned. That malicious smile made Obito frown, and ripples appeared in his heart, making him feel unusually uncomfortable. I may have to disappoint you, Obito. Since the glinting fruit works on you if it's combined with the sage technique, you may be in big trouble. Chapter 277. The two figures in the sky observed each other, and their sharp eyes seemed to penetrate each other. I'm going to be unlucky? As if he heard the funniest joke in the world, Obito's mouth raised a contemptuous and sarcastic smile. You should know when to stop. In front of the Jubi's Jinchuriki, any ninjutsu in the world is invalid. Seeing Dustless staring at him with a playful expression, Obito's expression stiffened, and the words on the tip of his tongue disappeared. Only now did he realize that the truth-seeking ball was ineffective against the golden flash. This guy's ability is not bad and he shouldn't be worse than me, be careful. Converging his contempt, Obito became cautious, and in his heart he labeled Dustless as a dangerous person. Not to mention the strange large-scale attack ninjutsu before, just the 9 Tomo Rinnegan and the blue eyes are enough to attract attention. Frowning slightly, Obito noticed that the chakra in Dustless's body went berserk, and his pupils widened, revealing a look of horror. Even if the amount of chakra is not as good as the Jubi's in his body, the amount is also unprecedented. How can an ordinary human have so much? Whoosh! While Obito was thinking hard about where Dustless's chakra came from, a sharp sound suddenly came from the front. Looking up, Dustless's figure has disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of him. Lightspeed kick. Good boy, you have guts and you are courageous enough to send yourself to your death. Staring at Dustless and the golden flash flying towards him, Obito sneered again and again, revealing his killing intent. He gently waved his arm forward, and the truth-seeking ball behind him rushed out. Tear him apart. Seeing that Dustless's leg was about to touch the truth-seeking ball, Obito coldly said, any matter that comes in contact with the truth-seeking ball will be completely erased, without exception. However, in the next moment, Obito was stunned, and his breathing and expression were all stagnant. The black light easily passed through the golden light, but what Abito didn't expect was that Dustless's calf didn't collapse and disappear because of the contact. Instead, it seemed to disappear into thin air, completely ignoring its existence. His calf, which could shatter a mountain, swept toward his head. What kind of joke is this? How could such a thing happen? Cursing in his heart, he hurriedly crossed his arms in front of his eyes in shock. At such a short distance, there wasn't enough time for him to activate divine might and defend himself. Wuxia. A powerful force that could destroy heaven and earth rushed towards Abito. Abito suddenly gave a muffled groan, and blood spurted from the corner of his mouth. His whole body was like a cannonball as he was bombarded to the ground. Boom, 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 a huge crater was formed on the ground and Abito was lying motionless on the ground. This guy is really abnormally strong. I thought his body was more fragile, but who would have thought that it was as hard as a meteorite? Dustless in the sky looked at Abito in the crater and couldn't help but frown. His little foot was still slightly numb. Just now he didn't feel like he kicked a soft human body. Dustless felt like he kicked a meteorite. Staring at Abito, who was still lying in the crater, half dead, Dustless's face was cold, and his pupils were surging with hostility. His 5 fingers were straight, and all of his fingertips were surrounded by flashing golden light. The Jubi's Jinchuriki was not so fragile. It was even more ridiculous to kick a Jinchuriki to death. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, countless small light bullets shot out from his 5 fingers, desperately roaring down. The target was naturally Abito, who was in the pit. After many years, Dustless no longer learned Kizaru's tricks, and developed many different tricks on his own. The ability of glinting fruit was to turn one's physique into a mysterious thing like light, and it had great potential in the future. Boom boom boom, dense golden light fell from the sky, and mercilessly destroyed Abito, and unscrupulously changed the appearance of the ground. It was like thousands of blades, and the sharpness was enough to turn Abito into a stick. The truth of taking advantage of a person's illness was known to the world, and Dustless knew it even more. This is just the beginning. What can the Jubi's Jinchuriki do? Today I will take everything from you and use it for myself. The corner of his mouth swept into a cold arc. Dustless's face was covered with frost, and the chakra in his body began to boil, like an erupting volcano. Celestial way. In an instant, Dustless's body was like a black hole in the universe, crazily swallowing and absorbing the natural chakra. The chakra that filled his body, whether it was the power or the content, increased by several levels in a short time. At the highest point of the sky, red roundwood was faintly seen falling from the sky, and the number was hard to predict. Bright God Gate. Peng peng peng. In the deep pit where Abito was lying, most of the red roundwood piled up in an instant, and the large number of the red roundwood filled the big pit, stirring up high dust. The power of the Bright God Gate was beyond doubt. Senju Hashirama had even used this technique to suppress the wild state of the Jubi, before becoming a Jinchuriki. Boom boom boom. Ka ka ka. After a moment of calmness, a strong chakra wave suddenly broke out in the deep pit, and the whole earth shook violently like an earthquake. At the same time, the red sacred wood that filled the big pit also turned black, as if its vitality was being sucked dry and broke into pieces. The deep pit was filled with dust and dark yellow smoke covered the entire sky. Do you think this trick to trick a child can subdue me? Should I say that you are naive, or should I say that you are too confident in your own strength? A mocking and disdainful voice was thrown out from the dust, and a tyrannical chakra was released. The sand and dust in the sky were suppressed in an instant, and the clear sky was restored. Ignorant fool, how can such a fragile Mokutan, you bastard? Abito was about to ridicule Dustless, but he was distracted by the pupil that came into his eyes, and his face suddenly became gloomy. Sorry to have kept you waiting for a long time. This technique requires a huge amount of natural chakra, and the absorbed natural chakra was used to suppress you. But fortunately, the time to suppress you is enough to refine more natural chakra. Celestial way, Mokutan, true thousand hands on top. Chapter 278. Wung. The moment the boundless Buddha appeared, the entire earth began to tremble. It was very fragile. It sounded funny, but that was the truth. So big. Eyebrows knitted together, Abito took a deep breath. He couldn't help but be shocked at the huge size of the Buddha. The giant Buddha made up of thousands of Buddha arms could no longer be described with the word shocking. The majestic size was like a moving mountain. Phew. First time using this technique. Although it's a bit difficult to control, it's quite simple. Dustless stood on top of the Buddha's head and smiled. Even if it was his first time using the senjutsu of wood release, although he wasn't very familiar with it, it wasn't difficult to control. Big? But, with such a big size, the target is also big. Obito nodded in agreement. The size of this giant Buddha was beyond the scope of human knowledge. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a ninjutsu used by a god, but the target was also very big and it wasn't good at moving. In fact, the user of this technique, Senju Hashirama, was indeed called a god, the god of ninjas. His face became gloomy, and he emitted a burning, killing intent. A spiral black greatsword shot out from his hand. It was more than 10 meters long and it looked ordinary, but it had an indescribable sharpness. This strange spiral greatsword seemed to be able to destroy all things. It was the divine sword Heavenly Swamp Spear. The user's strong will would be attached to the sword, creating such a sword of the heart. Controlling the Heavenly Swamp Spear required a strong will. The stronger the person's confidence, the more they could use the sword to the extreme. Stop here. Staring at the giant Buddha that was whizzing towards him, Obito's face was covered in frost. He circulated his aura to the maximum, and the black spiral sword in his hand swept over like a wave, wanting to split the giant Buddha statue into two. 6 Paths Senin's Heavenly Swamp Spear, not bad. Dustless nodded. This Heavenly Swamp Spear was formed by yin-yang release, so its power was needless to say. The stronger the person's will, the greater the power they could use. Now that Obito vowed to kill Dustless, he naturally used the Heavenly Swamp Spear to the extreme. But you are not the sage of 6 Paths, Obito. You are still far from it. Dustless smiled faintly, looking at the oncoming black greatsword with a mocking expression. Suddenly, the Tensigen in his right eye surged with powerful eye power fluctuations that seemed to be able to distort time and space, and the space around Dustless began to ripple. The emerald green light immediately covered Dustless's entire body, and a few green prayer beads also appeared behind him. The immortal of the 6 Paths might be able to destroy the world with this sword, but you can't. Dustless, who had entered the Tensigen chakra mode, sneered secretly. At the same time, he shook his arms slightly, and several prayer beads behind him flew to Dustless's chest. Staring at the black greatsword flying towards him, the light in Dustless's eyes became even more obvious, and the determination in his eyes became even deeper. In front of him, several green prayer beads suddenly gathered in the palm of Dustless's hand, turning into a weak golden light beam that remained in Dustless's palm, condensing and not dissipating, revealing a sharp aura that could cut through all things. It's time for you to end it, Uchiha Obito. After that, the golden light in Dustless's hand stretched infinitely, boundless, and was completely different from the Heavenly Swamp Spear. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh. The golden light roared out, and the golden light beam swept out directly towards the Heavenly Swamp Spear formed by the yin-yang release. At this moment, time and space were frozen forever. Boom boom boom. The 2 rays of light, one black and one gold, converged together and the void suddenly exploded. White boiling waves of air were emitted, and the entire sky was on fire in an instant. The temperature rose to 100 times higher than usual, and it was exceptionally hot. Impossible. It can actually move side by side with the Heavenly Swamp Spear. What the hell is this? His pupils dilated, and Obito stared in horror at the golden light beam that blocked the Heavenly Swamp Spear. He unconsciously took a deep breath, especially the arm that was controlling the Heavenly Swamp Spear. It was extremely difficult for him to control the Heavenly Swamp Spear to approach Dustless. Go die for me. Eyes red, teeth clenched, chakra gushed out of Obito's body, and he tried even harder to control the Heavenly Swamp Spear. He wanted to annihilate the golden light beam, but he couldn't move it at all. The Heavenly Swamp Spear is a sword of will. It seems that your conviction to kill me is not as strong as my Tao. Dustless was expressionless, and his eyes emitted a cold light that could penetrate all things. He said without a ripple, "You can't understand where my Tao lies. Your intent to kill me is very strong, but my Tao heart is stronger." After saying this, Dustless's mind began to empty. He recalled Otsutsuki's gentle smile, and the time they spent together rushed into Dustless's mind, and he was instantly energized. Ulua was where Dustless's Tao heart was. He raised his eyelids and looked at Obito with pity, and his cold voice resounded through the sky. "A person like you who is trained by the system will never understand what my heart desires. So, it's better for you to die peacefully." After saying this, the chakra on Dustless's body began to go berserk again, and boundless energy broke out of his body and poured into the golden light beam. The originally bright light beam shone even brighter, and the awe-inspiring luster penetrated through everything in the world. Boom, boom, boom. The hundreds of feet-long light beam stretched out again, and directly pierced through the earth, roaring endlessly into the depths of the earth. It can still grow, is there no limit? Looking back, looking at the penetrated depths of the earth, the corners of Obito's mouth twitched violently, and his expression became gloomier. Looking at the crazy face of Dustless, his heart trembled fiercely, and he was deeply moved. At this moment, Dustless gave him the feeling of a monster who was possessed by a demon. Murderous intent floated all over his body, and the irregular blood vessels of Rinnegan and Tensegan appeared like a spider web, penetrating the entire eyeball, and it was particularly terrifying and gloomy. Even Obito was afraid when he saw this scene. This was not the gap in strength but the madness of the mentality. Facing this fierce expression of abandoning everything to fight to the death, no one could remain calm. The golden light penetrated the earth without limit, as if to completely penetrate the entire earth. Good opportunity. Suppressing the fear in his heart, Obito's eyes instantly regained clarity. Dustless was controlling the long and narrow golden light beam with one hand, and at this moment, his movement was restricted, and it was a good opportunity to attack him. Without thinking, Obito flew directly towards Dustless, and the 9 truth-seeking balls behind him floated above Obito's head, wanting to give a fatal blow. The attack range of the truth-seeking balls is only 70 meters. Close the distance and use the truth-seeking balls to crush me. What a good abacus, but your plan is doomed to fail, Obito. The blood vessels in his eyes quickly converged, and Dustless also returned to normal from the madness. Staring at the rapidly approaching Obito and the 9 truth-seeking balls above his head, Dustless's eyes suddenly narrowed, and the light emitted from his eyes was extremely dangerous, giving people a feeling of uneasiness. The 9 Tomo Rinnegan in his left eye rippled, and the 9 black balls hanging on the black coil trembled slightly. The sight of the Rinnegan also fell on Obito, and the eye power began to go out of control. Mahabharata. Boom. The void trembled fiercely, and it could be clearly seen that the large-scale invisible ripples spread out, annihilating everything that came into contact with it. The invisible airwave was like a moving yin-yang release, and anything that came into contact with it was destroyed. This was one of the powers of Dustless's Rinnegan, which could cast a repulsive force that was far more than this Super Shinra Tensei, and almost anything that came into contact with it would be obliterated by this repulsive force. Obito was also crushed by this airwave, but this kid's body was too strong, and in the face of such a powerful airwave, there was no change in his body. However, he was bounced back in midair, and he was vomiting blood, indicating that he was also seriously injured. What kind of technique is that? Bastard, what kind of freak is this kid? Where did he get so many unstoppable techniques? Obito's face was pale and his tone was uncertain. He wiped the blood stains from the corner of his mouth, and he didn't even have time to react, and was directly swallowed by the massive airwave. Fortunately, I inherited everything from the Jubi, otherwise I would have been killed by that technique. Recalling the destructive repulsive force, Obito said with lingering fear. Even so, his bones were all broken and shattered, and his internal organs were all dislocated in an instant. But for Obito, the Jubi's Jinchuriki, these were minor injuries. Do you think it's over? It's still too early. Seeing Obito breathe a sigh of relief, Dustless grinned with a sarcastic smile, and at the same time, the giant beam that was previously hidden in the ground raised its head, and the arm of the beam that was hundreds of feet long suddenly lifted up. Boom, boom, boom. The beam that was hidden in the depths of the ground instantly spewed up, and the slender beam that rose from the ground split the ground, and went straight to Obito in midair. In the world of the system, a huge crack that was hundreds of kilometers long appeared on the ground. Don't even think about it. Feeling the beam coming from the ground, Obito forced himself to calm down, and at the same time he controlled the 9 liquids to form a tough black barrier to resist the destruction of the golden lightsaber. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the 1,000-hand Buddha that had stopped moving moved again and crushed toward Obito. A pincer attack from 2 sides was extremely dangerous. Chapter 279. The giant Buddha statue came roaring, and the boundless size, not to mention resistance, even the heart of resistance couldn't rise up. Without fighting spirit, anyone's will collapse. What's the use of this attack against me? Seeing the giant Buddha statue that almost covered the entire sky, Abito smiled casually, looking relaxed and even a little disdainful. However, Dustless looked at him in a more strange way, with a sharp light in his eyes, as if he saw an injured beast, showing a bloodthirsty smile. Whoosh! A dense number of fists were thrown out, countless like raindrops. The huge iron fist could easily break mountains, and the powerful force was enough to sweep everything. The power of this technique is beyond doubt, but for me who is already a god, it's just a tickle. His eyes were as calm as water, looking at the giant fists coming from the sky. Abito's expression was natural, and he was not afraid. The biggest difference between Jubi's Jinchuriki and ordinary ninjas is the control of truth-seeking ball and yin-yang release, and the huge boundless chakra of Jubi itself. Compared to ordinary ninjas in the secular world, to some extent, Jubi's Jinchuriki is an omnipotent god. Of course, this also varies from person to person. You dare to call yourself a god? Have you reached such a realm? Well, I'll let you indulge in the so-called god fantasy. Raising his eyelids, Dustless sneered at Abito. The disdain in his eyes was clear. The reason why gods are called gods is that they can do things that ordinary humans can't do. If one day humans can do things that gods can do, then gods will lose their aura and become an ordinary member of the 3,000 worlds. Abito in front of him, Dustless and he are barely at the same level, and even without the factor of chakra and Jubi, Dustless can crush dozens of Abito. Looking up, Abito was silent, looking at the thousands of giant fists coming toward him. His arm shook, and a crimson flame barrier separated him from the attack of the Buddha. Uchiha Flame Formation. The crimson flame enchantment was exposed in the air, separating the fists of the great Buddha from Abito. The enchantment was hot enough to crush the void and restrict all things. The highest temperature was like the red lotus karmic fire from hell. It was impossible to get close to it. Bang bang bang. Without exception, the dense fists all landed on the flame-enchanted boundary. The flame-enchanted boundary, which was tens of meters tall, trembled incessantly. Soon, many cracks appeared and spread in all directions, almost swallowing the barrier in front of them. Idiot, compared to Senju Hashirama, although I'm a half-baked monk, my cultivation is not deep. However, I have both the Uchiha's blood and Senju's cells, so I can use would release more perfectly than anyone else, including Hashirama. Dustless said confidently. With the power of 6 paths he could use would release perfectly. Even Hashirama could only look at him and sigh. Ka. Sure enough, in less than a few breaths of time, the cracks on the barrier of fire grew bigger and bigger. The long and narrow hole swallowed the entire barrier of fire. Bang! In the end it couldn't resist the attack. The flame-enchanted boundary turned into snow-like fragments and fell to the ground. Abito, who was behind it, naturally couldn't escape the great Buddha's fists. It's broken? His eyes were empty as he stared at the oncoming giant fists. Abito lost his mind for a moment. In a trance, he instinctively controlled the truth-seeking ball to form a defensive enchantment. Bang bang bang, the giant fists all fell on the defensive enchantment. Because of the sage method, the truth-seeking ball couldn't make it collapse. Abito could only hide in the truth-seeking ball and passively defend. Your time of death has come. Staring at Abito in the enchantment, Dustless's murderous aura was overflowing, and the evil golden chakra erupted from his body. The boundless chakra erupted from Dustless's body and expanded without limit, forming a giant with a height of dozens of feet. Looking up, Abito saw this golden giant with 2 heads and 4 arms. There were 2 straight tachi on his waist. He was covered in ancient and simple armor. On his head was a ferocious and extraordinary Tengu armor. He was mighty and unyielding. His scarlet evil eyes were like a devil from hell. As long as he glanced at you, your soul would tremble. It was Dustless's complete form Kinsusanoo. Without the sage method chakra, I can't cause any harm to him. Yin-yang release can nullify any ninjutsu in the world. The truth-seeking ball also has the same ability. It can erase any matter that comes in contact with it. The simplest and most practical way to deal with them is the sage method. In that case, the sage method, all the pores on his body opened, and the majestic natural chakra overflowed from Dustless's body and poured into the huge body of Kinsusanoo. The golden, irregular, mysterious runes were like fish entering the sea, cheerfully flowing in complete body Susanoo's body. In the blink of an eye, they expanded to every corner of complete body Susanoo, and complete body Susanoo's physique once again enlarged. Ka. Suddenly the ground under Kinsusanoo's feet collapsed. Apparently it couldn't bear the weight of the giant body and the ground sank. Because of the injection of the sage method, the height of Kinsusanoo's complete form was sublimated again, reaching a terrifying height of 500 or 600 feet. Even the white clouds floating in the sky stopped at the waist of Kinsusanu. Kinsusanu, no one in the history of Uchiha has surpassed me, and that includes Uchiha Madara. With a proud smile, Dustless looked down at the ant-like Obito below, and with a slight movement of his mind, Kinsusanu's Tachi of light came out, and the golden light shrouded the entire sky and covered the entire earth. Chapter 280. Dustless, who was in the immortal spell Complete Body Susanoo, looked indifferent. Looking around, the whole system world was in his eyes. There was no creature at the top of the clouds, only Dustless was admiring himself, looking down at the thousands of miles of rivers and mountains below. Suddenly, a feeling of looking down at the mountains and mountains appeared in his heart, as if the existence of Susanoo was deterring the limit. The surrounding clouds and mist dispersed one after another, and the dense and endless sky suddenly became very clear, and everything could be seen at a glance. The heavens are so small. Just like what Obito said before, I am now equivalent to a god who can create and destroy the world. Looking down at the battered ground below, Dustless muttered to himself expressionlessly. At the same time, he crossed his arms in front of him and closed his eyes naturally. Kinsusanoo began to dance with the Tachi of light that had been unsheathed for a long time. The dazzling golden light made people not dare to look directly at it. They could only secretly observe it through the small gaps between the 5 fingers. The pitch-black shadow fell mercilessly, and the Tachi that contained the power to destroy everything fell mercilessly. The huge golden slash covered the sky and covered the earth, like the full blow of a god. The void that was still clear just now dimmed, like the sunset at dusk. There was a faint buzzing sound that was filled with endless sadness. As the wielder of the Tachi, Dustless's face was filled with loneliness. The aura of isolation spread out, and he looked coldly at the enemy. His emotionless eyes were filled with indifference. Whoosh! The huge golden slash swept towards the enchantment made by the truth-seeking jade. Under this bright luster, the omnipotent truth-seeking jade also showed its weak side, and was directly swallowed by the sharp slash. Boom boom boom! The powerful force directly swallowed Obito, and pulled out a long and narrow hole that was nearly 100 kilometers long on the ground. It was like a natural moat that could not be crossed. Facing this thick crack, a sense of helplessness rose in his heart, and his face was filled with despair. Dustless was such a person. When he defeated the enemy, it was not only the physical body that was defeated but also the heart. As expected of the legendary ten-tailed beast. Such a huge chakra, with such a vigorous vitality and recovery ability, under the observation of the Tenseigin, Dustless could clearly see that Obito's truth-seeking ball was shattered by brute force, and even his whole body was covered in blood. Some of his heart organs were exposed, but under the terrifying recovery ability of the Jubi, he was able to recover quickly. In less than a blink of an eye, it was as good as new. How terrifying. No one can compare to his endurance. Seeing this, Dustless sighed. The Jubi's recovery ability was something anyone could admire. Dustless even remembered that Rikudo Madara recovered after being pierced through the heart by Hashiman Kai. Looking at Obito indifferently, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. The effect of Obito's fusion with the Jubi is obviously not as good as Uchiha Madara. There is a gap between the two sides. Squinting, staring at Obito's left and right eyes, Dustless shook his head. The value of the Rinnegan can't be fully exerted at all. Only when it falls on a peerless hero like Madara can its value be reflected. In the end, Obito is a spare tire, the one in the system is, and the one in the outside world is also. Don't underestimate me. In the dark, Obito seemed to feel Dustless's ridicule, and he jumped up and flew straight toward the sky, looking down at Dustless with a cold face. It can be clearly seen that at this moment, Obito's face was pale and weak, giving a feeling of a serious illness, and his whole body was full of indescribable fragility. Obviously, although the previous hideous wound has been repaired, the wound in the heart can't be repaired, and the unprecedented physical torture of being cut open is not a joke. That I didn't exert its value at all. It's a pity that it was wasted, but there are still some things on you that I can use, so it's not a waste. Looking at Obito's Manjikyu Sharingan, Dustless said thoughtfully. As long as he can defeat Obito, he can get everything from him, including the Jubi chakra in his body, and the Kamui Dojutsu. Injuring me makes you so arrogant that you forget yourself? Staring at Dustless, Obito said with hatred, and the chakra began to surge violently, and the palm of his hand suddenly split open, and a mysterious black iron rod appeared. It seems to be yin-yang release. Frowning, Dustless looked at the black iron rod in Obito's hand. Yin-yang release has no effect on him. Whoosh! Obito didn't intend to use this ordinary black iron rod to attack Dustless. Instead, he threw it to the side like throwing garbage and casually threw it to the ground. Could it be that jutsu? Interesting. Dustless chuckled with Kinsusanu Senjutsu perfect form, and his eyes flashed with understanding. His light eyes fell on Obito, as if silently telling him to come at him if he has any means, which made the latter's heart even more gloomy. Whoosh! 4 similar black iron rods were thrown out, and they were connected to each other in a regular pattern, and it was clearly seen that they were hexagonal. It really is the 6 Crimson Yang formation. But what does he mean by using the 6 Crimson Yang formation? Is he afraid that I will run away? Looking at the 6 black iron rods from the corner of his eyes, Dustless secretly murmured. At the same time he began to be vigilant. Obito obviously did this because he was afraid that he would run away. In this case, it meant that he must be preparing an unknown big move. 6 Crimson Yang formation. As Obito's voice fell, with the previous black iron rod as the center, a hexagonal dark red enchantment was suddenly formed, isolating the entire world outside, completely sealing it. Only Dustless and Obito were inside the enchantment. Bring it on. Dustless, who was in the 6 Crimson Yang formation, was not afraid of Obito. Instead, he took an inch and wanted a mile, provoking Obito. Chapter 281. Raising his eyes slightly, Wuxia looked around the 6 Crimson Sun formation, with a serious expression. After a while, the smile in his eyes disappeared. He found that it was a little difficult for him to break this ordinary-looking hexagonal column barrier. Thinking back, he began to recall the 6 Crimson Yang formation. It's worthy of being the strongest enchantment that can resist 4 Jidama at the same time. Its toughness can't be underestimated. Is this guy also going to release Jidama? Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of clarity, and his voice was low, slightly depressed. The Jidama released by the Jidama is enough to crush together. Even the Jidama released by the Hachibi and the Kyubi can only look at it and sigh. But this ordinary-looking enchantment in front of him can withstand 4 Jidama of the Jidama. It's self-evident how strong the defense is. But how can physical attacks work on me? Dustless's depressed look swept away, and even the corner of his mouth was lightly humming an unknown tune. Although it sounded nondescript, it's not difficult to see that Dustless's heart was as calm as water. Dustless didn't care about Obito at all. Only people like Madara who open Rinnegan can attract his attention. Ka. At this moment, the ground suddenly burst open and a thick tree emerged from the ground. Like a spiritual snake, it surged towards the sky at a rapid speed. 4 giant purplish-red flower buds could be clearly seen. The surroundings were filled with an unknown sticky liquid, and even a fishy stench permeated the air. Fortunately, I've seen Lady Huey's real body before. Otherwise, I'd really associate her with the flower demon. When the foreign smell entered his ears and nose, Wuxia frowned slightly. He casually blew a breeze to blow away the strange smell as he muttered to himself. In all fairness, after seeing the Jubi and the sacred tree one after another, no one would imagine that the original state was a graceful woman, Otsutsuki Kagaya. The smell of foreign creatures was even stronger, and it spread throughout the enchantment. Looking around, the 4 flower buds that were originally closed all bloomed. The putrid and nauseating smell came from within the flower bud. It was like a black hole bottomless. An ancient aura continuously gushed out from within, describing its own extraordinariness. It could devour and erase all matter. Funny, in front of me you still want to grow without limit? Dustless's face became cold and he laughed sarcastically. The complete form of Senjutsu Susanoo suddenly crossed its hands, and the wind and clouds in the sky surged. As if it was summoned by the god of light, a large number of light beams rushed over, like a spring in the deep sea, crazily swallowing and plundering the photons, constantly compressing and removing the dregs. This is the price to pay for treating me as air. Kinsusanu Yasakani no Magatama. The combination of complete body Susanoo and Yasakani no Magatama has already limited the development of its power to the greatest extent, and now it is fused with Senjutsu, which is a more powerful nature chakra, so its power has naturally increased by several times. The golden light ball that was only the size of a palm also received a qualitative leap and became a lot bigger. Not only did its power increase, but the area it covered was also unprecedentedly vast and infinite, almost filling the entire enchantment. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Poochie poochie. In just a few minutes, the enchantment that was originally dark red was dyed golden, and it was unusually dazzling. The huge golden light ball eroded the big tree unscrupulously, and it was ruthlessly ravaged. Layer by layer, it was constantly stripped and scattered. It was a horrible sight. The same was true for the earth, it was easily penetrated, and the ground was covered with dense holes. A cockroach that can't be killed? It seems that if I don't completely eliminate him, this boring battle will not end. Under the natural destruction of the big tree and the light ball, Dustless originally hoped that this technique could also kill Obito. Obviously it was a bit whimsical. In the face of the abnormal recovery ability of the ten-tailed Jinchuriki, even if Obito was suffering from physical destruction, it could not cause substantial damage to him. This was because every time Obito was beaten into a bloody mess, his abnormal recovery ability would make him unscathed. Unless I kill him in one hit, otherwise it is impossible to kill him. Moreover, even if my pure physical attack is far stronger than him, the amount of chakra is completely different. If I don't get rid of him quickly, the one who will lose in the end will be me. With a heavy look in his eyes, Dustless's murderous intent exploded. He was not Obito, he had the ten-tailed Jinchuriki in his body, and he could endlessly repair his body. Moreover, chakra was endless. On the other hand, although chakra was also very large, the continuous battle had consumed more than 30% of it. If this continued, the advantage would become a disadvantage. Without thinking, Dustless removed the Kinsusanu that was integrated with the mystical technique. If he wanted to destroy the opponent in the purest way, it would be more straightforward to use the truth-seeking ball. Ka. When Dustless was about to make his move, the big tree that was beaten into pieces again came out from the depths of the ground. This time it was even more excessive than before. This time the scale was actually 6 buds. What made Dustless depressed the most was that inside the purple-red buds that were full of mucus, there were small black balls floating. This is equivalent to 6 ten-tailed Jinchuriki Baijidama. This kid is really generous. His pupils slightly shrank, Dustless's calm eyes rippled. Obviously, he was also surprised by Obito's madness. After all, he was surrounded by the powerful 6 Crimson Yang formation, which means that Obito himself will also be swallowed by the 6 Baijidama. The chain reaction caused by the simultaneous explosion of 6 ten-tailed Jinchuriki Baijidama, I am afraid no one will be relieved. But this is also good, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get rid of you. The ripples in the bottom of his eyes quickly disappeared, Dustless regained his calmness. He looked at the Baijidama that was constantly expanding, and the mocking smile on the corner of his mouth became more obvious and profound. Chapter 282. High-density chakra was constantly spitting out from the bud, and the dark Baijidama was constantly enlarging. The roots deep in the ground seemed to be connected to the source of chakra. There was no limit at all. Soon you will be mine. Staring at the huge black Baijidama with envy, Wuxia didn't hide the covetous look in his eyes. After the boundless and almost infinite chakra is given to him, he won't be invincible, but at least if he encounters Kaguya head-on, even if he doesn't completely defeat her, he will be safe and sound in her hands. The Baijidama on the bud bloomed at the same time, and the energy ball, which was rotating at high speed, shrouded his heart like a nightmare, and the shadow in his heart could not be waved away. The increasing Baijidama almost filled the entire space of the enchantment barrier and crushed everything. Buzz. The space inside the enchantment barrier was softly humming, and the invisible humming sound seemed to be begging for mercy, adding a little dark clouds and the color of doomsday to the void. Obito's face was cold, and his temperament was isolated from the world. His face was full of scales from the beginning to the end, and he maintained an endless killing intent. The existence of Obito in the system only has one essence, which is to kill Dustless. Goodbye. Staring at the huge tree or simply looking at the Baijidama in the mouth of the bud, Obito was expressionless, and the eyes emitted from his pupils were also abnormally cold, without any luster, as if he was looking at a dead person. Of course, it was not ruled out that Dustless at this moment was a corpse in his eyes. Boom boom boom. The 6 huge Baijidama obviously reached the limit, and began to make a boom 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 sound, and the airwaves thrown out, even the slightest one was comparable to a hurricane of more than 10 levels. In short, the space within this 6 Crimson Yang formation was a complete mess, no different from the apocalypse. The scattered waves of air were unable to penetrate the dark red defensive barrier, but they wreaked havoc on the ground like a swamp. The space inside the system was slightly trembling. The ferocious airwaves were like thousands of blades, easily changing the environment inside the enchantment barrier, and everything that came in contact with it collapsed. However, the strange thing was that when these ferocious astral winds passed through Dustless, there was no effect. Dustless was clearly standing motionless in the same place, but he seemed to be like a reflection in the water, unable to cause any physical damage. This guy's ability, seeing this, Obito frowned deeply. This kind of ability to ignore physical attacks was simply unheard of. It was absolutely impossible to use the word heaven-defying to describe it. Humph, any ninjutsu has an unknown weakness in the face of 6 Baijidama, let's see what confidence you have to resist. Seeing Wu Chen's indifferent expression, turning a deaf ear to the 6 giant Baijidama, Obito snorted and remained silent. He had a feeling that he was being looked down upon. You actually dare to look down on me, I'll make you suffer. Obito stared at Wu Chen with a murderous look on his face. He secretly said in his heart, strong people have their own pride. Wu Chen remained calm in front of 6 Baijidamas. That was a slap to his face. Suddenly, several dark beads flew out from the top of his head, and Obito controlled them to liquefy them, and with himself as the center, they formed a 360-degree circular defensive enchantment barrier. There was no doubt that these dark beads were naturally the truth-seeking jade, the most perfect technique, and one of the most important signs of stepping into the realm of gods. It could be used to retreat, defend, and attack. It was a perfect existence. Let's see how you resist. Obito's whole body was completely sealed by the truth-seeking jade's defensive enchantment, and his cold voice lingered in the air for a long time, as if it was filled with endless magic, and didn't disperse for a long time. Staring at the completely sealed Obito, the cold smile on the corner of Dustless's mouth became even more obvious, and his murderous intent was fully exposed. Although those 6 Baijidama were extremely terrifying, Dustless really didn't care about them. Ordinary attacks like these really couldn't cause any substantial damage to him. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Do you think you are invincible with the truth-seeking jade's defensive enchantment, naive? Seeing Obito shrinking back inside the truth-seeking jade to avoid the impact of the Baijidama, Dustless's chakra began to go berserk, and his murderous intent was awe-inspiring. As for those monstrous Baijidama, he directly ignored it. Boom boom boom. 6 huge Baijidama obviously reached their limit and shot out from the disgusting mouth of the flower bud, and directly rushed in all directions. The moment they came into contact with the 6 Crimson Yang array, the Baijidama broke into pieces, and the whole enchantment barrier was set on fire. Although the 6 Crimson Yang array can withstand the attack of 4 Baijidama, but when the number of Baijidama reached 6, it was obviously a bit difficult, and the cracking sound of the barrier could be clearly heard. Everything has a limit, and the 6 Crimson Yang array in front of him is such. Boom boom boom. The solid barrier shattered like a mirror, and the blazing heat wave caused by the Baijidamas of the 6 ten-tailed beasts swallowed the world in an instant. The entire world inside the system turned fiery red. On the other hand, Dustless was standing in the sky as if nothing happened, staring at Obito. His whole body was bathed in a sea of fire, but it couldn't hurt him. With a bloodthirsty smile on the corner of his mouth, Dustless's chakra began to become restless. Everyone knew the rule of reciprocity, and Wu Chen was no exception. Dustless in the depths of the sea of fire was expressionless, and under the Tensigen chakra mode, his whole body was floating with the luster of emerald. But before that, I'll temporarily restrict your movements. Narrowing his eyes, Dustless's eyes flashed with horror, and the Rinnegan Sharingan surged with cold murderous intent. Obito's movement speed is very fast, and if he doesn't restrict his speed while casting a technique, even if he can barely hit him, it will be difficult to achieve a fatal effect. Staring at Obito, who was still under the protection of the truth-seeking jade, Dustless sneered again and again, his palm facing the sky, and suddenly 15 high-density chakra energy balls flew out of his hand. Chibaku Tensei. Chapter 283. 15 dark beads floated to the sky, and the majestic repulsive force spread out and shrouded the entire earth. Suddenly putting his hands together, Dustless stared at Obito and saw that the latter was still hiding in the enchantment, and the corner of his mouth raised into a mocking smile. Suddenly exerting force, the Chibaku Tensei in the sky was also pulled, and the irresistible gravitational force spread out, and the dark sphere became darker, and the range of the gravitational force covered the ground within hundreds of kilometers. Everything contained the momentum of collapse. The unsightly black sphere shot down with a majestic repulsive force, and the endless space and time instantly changed shape, and in a trance, it seemed to have come to the depths of the universe, and everywhere was full of endless gravitational force, and there was no way to advance or retreat. Even the flames of the previous Baijidama explosion were directly swallowed by the gravitational force, and all of them were attracted to the sky by the Chibaku Tensei. Bastard, this guy is good at calculating. Perceiving the changes in the outside world, Obito's face changed dramatically, and he stared at the 15 black spheres in the sky, and his face turned blue in an instant. In the face of 15 Chibaku Tensei, no one could be relieved. But his eye power is strong, and so is that chakra. The scale of 15 Chibaku Tensei is not a joke. The eye power of Rinnegan must meet the requirements. In addition, the chakra contained in the body is extremely demanding, and in the case of insufficient chakra, it will consume vitality. On the other hand, Dustless was relaxed and calm, and he didn't look like chakra at all. It also showed how strong Dustless's chakra was. In fact, what Obito didn't know was that controlling 15 Chibaku Tensei at once, even Dustless was mentally exhausted. He didn't have a cheat like the Jubi in his body, and he relied entirely on his own chakra to consume Obito. But, how can you succeed? Especially this technique is full of loopholes. Staring at Dustless with a sneer, Obito's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He also had Rinnegan, so he naturally knew where the weakness of Chibaku Tensei was. As long as the black sphere is destroyed, everything will be back to normal. Obito said calmly. He was not afraid of these black spheres. Do you think I'll give you a chance to attack them? Looking at Obito with a sneer, Dustless's face was full of disapproval. It was true that Obito knew the weakness of Chibaku Tensei, but the premise was that he had the opportunity to destroy them one by one. With Dustless's order, his palms suddenly closed together, and the Rinnegan once again burst out with even more powerful eye power, and the black ball in the sky suddenly emitted a demonic brilliance, becoming even deeper and darker, and the gravitational force it emitted was several times stronger than before. Ka. The ground that was riddled with holes cracked again, and the earth and mountains quickly collapsed into broken walls. The scale reached the range of 15 Chibaku Tensei, and the gravitational force instantly increased by 100 times, and the affected area was unprecedentedly vast. The whole earth slowly rose, and even the giant mountain that was thousands of meters long was swallowed by the absolute gravitational force of 15 Chibaku Tensei. Obito was the focus of Dustless's attention, and he was directly sucked into the sky. Explode for me. His fingers suddenly flashed a black iron rod, and staring at the several dark spheres, Obito threw the black iron rod in his hand into the sky, and went straight toward the Chibaku Tensei. Boom boom boom. The iron rod inevitably hit the black sphere, and the void suddenly swept a blazing flame, causing a chain reaction, and several Chibaku Tensei, not far away, were also detonated. Obito easily destroyed 6 Chibaku Tensei. The earth that was pulled by 6 Chibaku Tensei fell back to the ground. At this moment, Obito turned into a savior, and helped the devastated earth, and all the floating soil in the air fell to the ground. And Dustless, who was controlling the Chibaku Tensei, undoubtedly became the devil, the mastermind of tearing the earth. Boom boom boom. A few more black iron rods were thrown out, and 6 more Chibaku Tensei exploded, and the black smoke burned to every corner of the sky. In this way it's easy to control them. Dustless stared at the remaining Chibaku Tensei in the sky and nodded slightly. He was not angry but smiled. It's good to have a lot of power, but it's not easy to control at the same time, and the power is not concentrated enough. There are only 3 Chibaku Tensei left, and it's much easier to control, and the power can be more condensed. And most importantly, Dustless is not Uchiha Madara, the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, and chakra is almost unlimited, so it also reduces the burden on chakra. Buzz buzz buzz. 13 of the 15 Chibaku Tensei were destroyed, and it's reasonable to say that the range of gravity should be reduced, but the fact is the opposite. The restraint of gravity did not reduce but expanded a lot. Even the range of the Chibaku Tensei is more vast than the previous 15. Looking up, the remaining 3 Chibaku Tensei are strangely fused together. Is this the ability of his left eye? Chibaku Tensei can be controlled like this. Staring at the 3 fused Chibaku Tensei, in surprise, Obito couldn't help but take a deep breath, and his face was heavy. He didn't expect Dustless to have such a means, and he can control the Chibaku Tensei that has been released. Boom boom boom. The giant mountain that fell to the ground before began to float again, and its speed was much faster, completely ignoring the existence of gravity, and went straight to the dark sphere that became bigger after the fusion. Ka. The mountain debris that came from all sides in the sky quickly condensed, and soon buried the dark sphere, and it was tightly wrapped by countless stones and disappeared. Don't even think about it. Struggling with his body and using all his strength to get rid of the discomfort caused by gravity at the critical moment, a black pearl suddenly floated out from behind Obito, and changed it into a sharp kunai according to his will, and threw it at the small sphere that was about to be buried, hoping to blow it up. A kunai made of truth-seeking jade. Do you really put me in your eyes, Obito? Dustless, who has excellent eyesight, naturally saw the kunai flying out, and at the moment he just sneered, and at the same time the Rinnegan of his left eye locked on the kunai made of truth-seeking jade. The purple Rinnegan of Rinnegan surged with cold air, and the 9 black tomo hanging on it also swayed, and the focus of the line of sight was the dark kunai. Dustless's eye power suddenly began to riot, and his pupils widened, and he shouted, Mahabharata. Boom. In the void, an unparalleled repulsive force suddenly exploded, and the kunai made of truth-seeking jade was directly swallowed, without any resistance. The repulsive force was directly shattered. The invincible truth-seeking jade felt quite fragile at this moment. Dustless smiled slightly when he saw this. His Mahabharata and Madara's Tomb of Samsara, border prison, are indeed very similar, but there are essential differences. As long as someone has the 6 paths senjutsu, they can still perceive the existence of the shadow, but his Mahabharata can't be defended at all, and it can't be sensed at all. In short, both techniques have their own advantages and disadvantages. Just a canary in a cage, you want to escape after entering the cage. Dream on. Staring at Obito, who was still trying to escape under the gravitational restraint of Chibaku Tensei, Dustless sneered again and again, and he even wanted to escape. It's really a fool's dream. Hee. His palms closed again, and Dustless's momentum rose to the limit, and chakra was desperately leaking out, swallowing everything around it. As Dustless's strength increased, the Chibaku Tensei, fused with 3 black spheres, became more ferocious, and directly pulled the struggling Obito over and sealed him inside the Chibaku Tensei forever. In the sky, an unprecedented giant sphere floated, no different from the moon. Phew. Finally done. No, this is not the end. Dustless sat on the ground without caring about his image, and looked up at the giant sphere, gasping for breath. After a moment of rest, Dustless stood up again, and he knew that this was not the end. The practice must be to kill the opponent, and this was just a simple action of sealing Obito, not killing him. Moreover, Dustless didn't think that the ordinary Chibaku Tensei could seal Obito's movements. Although it was a fusion of 3 high-density chakra energy spheres and it was powerful, but in the end it was still an ordinary Chibaku Tensei, and its power was far less than the strongest sealing technique, 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei. Ka. Sure enough, some cracks appeared on the giant meteorite suspended in mid-air. It was not obvious yet, but it quickly spread around, and the cracks spread quickly like ripples in the water. I'll take this opportunity to kill you. Looking up at the cracks on the meteorite, Dustless's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his right arm gently waved forward, and the green prayer beads behind him moved forward, wandering in front of him and circling around Dustless. I can only use the truth-seeking ball to erase you. After that, the hesitation in his eyes disappeared, and his eyes flashed with determination. At the same time, the green prayer beads slowly condensed, and several prayer beads gathered in front of Dustless, and continued to compress and condense, and a moment later, a black sphere was formed, Kinsusanu. The evil materialized golden chakra broke out of his body, and layers of golden skeletons piled up, and the vast body crushed the entire sky, and the endless sky was bathed in golden luster. Not enough, condense. Dustless slightly raised his eyes, and after noticing that Kinsusanu's body was very small, in fact it was already very big, he frowned slightly and a cold light gathered in his eyes, and soon after chakra erupted again. A simple golden armor condensed from the bottom of Kinsusanu's feet, and it draped up layer by layer and continued to extend, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the giant skeletons and finally the head, and the mask that formed the long nose of the hideous armor. It was Dustless's complete Kinsusanu. This was not the end. Dustless's body quickly overflowed with a huge amount of natural chakra, and mysterious golden charms poured into the complete Kinsusanu's body. His height, which had stopped growing, actually began to grow once again. The earth also began to tremble. Immortal technique, Kinsusanu. Aoao, it was as if it had been given life. The 500 to 600 feet tall giant looked up to the sky in anger. The airwaves that came out of its mouth directly crushed the rolling clouds. It expressed the satisfaction in its heart, and the whole earth was buzzing and trembling. Looking closely, one could see that the complete Kinsusanu was different, and at this moment, it was holding a weapon that had never been seen before, and it was obviously of an unknown age, and there were traces of the vicissitudes of time on it. Chapter 284. Looking around, Susanu's head reached the sky and its feet were firmly planted on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, and its whole body was filled with ancient decaying aura. Its scarlet eyes were glaring at the void in front of it, revealing a blazing fighting spirit. The complete body Susanu, which contained the senjutsu, revealed its sharpness. Its whole body was surrounded by an invincible aura, and its imposing manner was magnificent. It was like an ancient war god that came out of a space-time tunnel, full of ancient charm. The vicissitudes of life on its body was silently telling that even the irresistible power of time couldn't erode it. And the weapon in Kinsusanu's hand was unheard of, never seen before. Dustless had never used it in his previous battles, but looking at its shape, it should be a bow and arrow. Of course, there were also people who recognized it. If Uchiha Sasuke was here, he would exclaim, "Who the hell touched my precious spiritual bow?" When Dustless defeated Uchiha Sasuke, he naturally took everything from him, including his ability, Kinsusanu's weapon, and many other resources. It's time to end it. Looking at the giant meteorite in the sky that had collapsed, Dustless's mouth gently rose, outlining a relaxed smile. This blow will completely kill Obito, this annoying cockroach that can't be killed. Ka ka ka. The dust piled up into grains fell from the sky and fell heavily on the ground, smashing countless deep pits, like the surface of the moon with uneven surface layers. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the black spiral sword that penetrated the giant meteorite. It was the heavenly swamp spear used by the sage of the six paths in the past. Jubi, the only thing I lack now is you. Wait for me, I will take you away soon. Dustless's eyes turned into a dazzling light. The tone of his voice was full of confidence, as if he could defeat Obito. Looking up, Senjutsu, complete body Susanu suddenly raised its thick and powerful arm, and its strong right arm was holding a spiritual bow, aiming at the inside of Chibaku Tensei where Uchiha Obito was. Let me show you one of my strongest moves. After that, Dustless's sneer became deeper and more obvious. At the same time, he gently waved his arm, and a black sphere appeared, quietly floating in front of Dustless, swaying gently. The black sphere was particularly mysterious. The dark halo revealed the most ancient evil, as if it was a super existence before the world was created, and it was the mastermind behind the destruction of the world. This is the horror of truth-seeking ball. It can easily create and destroy the world, and it is also one of the capital of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Dustless's body didn't have the Jubi, nor the nine-tailed beast chakra. The reason why he could use truth-seeking ball was because of the blessing of Tensigen. Of course, all of this originated from Otsutsuki Haruo, the peerless woman. In his heart he missed Otsutsuki Uluo a little more. Thinking of that graceful and smiling face as well as the cute little dimples hanging on her pretty face, Wu Chen's heart was particularly satisfied. Even if Uluo often threw tantrums with him, she was content and knew when to advance and retreat. What else can I ask for in life? The corner of his mouth raised a strange smile. Dustless clenched his fists, and at the same time, the truth-seeking ball in front of him shattered, turning into countless black ink floating in the air. Dustless gently waved his hand, and the dense black ink fell on Kinsusanu's bowstring. Annihilation between heaven and earth without a trace is really the most suitable way for you to die, Obito. Staring at the gradually collapsing meteorite, and the spiral sword that had already poked its head out, Dustless sneered again and again. The sight in his pupils suddenly solidified, and the momentum of his whole body tightened. Condense for me. As Dustless's voice fell, the dark ink gathered on the black spirit bow suddenly condensed, quickly shrank, and turned into a black arrow of several feet long. Kinsusanu's left arm picked up the arrow condensed from the truth-seeking ball, pulled the bowstring to the maximum extent, and aimed directly at Obito, who was about to break out of the seal. Truth-seeking ball is a black jade that contains all the properties of the 5 elements of yin and yang. It transcends the Kekkei Genkai limit and Kekkei Genkai, and any matter that comes in contact with it will completely collapse. Therefore, Obito will undoubtedly die if he is shot by the arrow. Kakaka? The giant meteorite continued to peel off, and the huge meteorite fragments continued to fall to the ground, smashing countless deep pits, and the spiral black sword became more and more obvious. Dustless, who had excellent vision, even saw Obito intact. As expected of the Jubi's Jinchuriki, he's really strong. Although Dustless didn't think that Chibaku Tensei could seal Obito, he didn't expect him to break out of the seal so easily, and it didn't cause any damage to him at all. But his voice quickly became cold, and Dustless's face overflowed with hostility, and his murderous aura began to go out of control. At the same time, Kinsusanu tightened the bowstring again, and the sharp black arrow was aimed directly at Obito's abdomen. "I'll kill you now." With a grim smile, Kinsusanu's arm that was pulling the bowstring suddenly loosened, and the powerful force directly bounced the black arrow out of the truth-seeking ball. The target was Obito's heart. For people like Uchiha Obito, Dustless will never be merciful, whether it's the one in the system or the Uchiha Obito in the outside world, as long as there's a chance or when he's no longer useful. He will kill this kind of person who has weak will and is easy to collapse under the influence of mouth release. Simply compared to the enemy, sometimes the teammate who cheats the teammate is often much more threatening than the enemy. Especially Obito's sweetheart Noera Rin, who was killed by Dustless. Once he learns the truth, there's no doubt that this kid will madly retaliate against Dustless at all costs. Chapter 285. Dustless hated people who were not firm in their beliefs and always liked to waver. Obito was such a person, and naturally he was also the target of his hatred. Therefore, whether it was the Obito in the system or the Obito in the outside world, if one day he really became an enemy, Dustless would definitely not hesitate to kill him with his sword. His strength is really strong. Even now I am not his opponent. In the dark space, Obito secretly murmured, and his heart was filled with emotion and fear. He thought that he had obtained the power to fight with the Sage of Six Paths, but he was beaten by Dustless without any power to fight back. In particular, the powerful move from before was still lingering in his mind, and the shadow left by it could not be waved away in a short time. I can only rely on the endless chakra to fight with him so that I have the hope of winning. With a flash of light in his eyes, Obito secretly decided. Dustless's pure physical attack was much stronger than his, and even the two were not on the same level. Dustless knew almost all the moves that Obito knew, but Dustless knew the moves that Obito knew, let alone know he did not even know how to understand them. In fact, when Obito said these words, his heart was also extremely bitter. The dignified Jinchuriki of the Ten-Tailed, and he thought that he was on the same level as the Sage of Six Paths, but he was beaten to the point where he could only passively defend. It was ridiculous to use the strategy of supporting. But the final winner is still me. The complexity in his eyes quickly converged and turned into endless indifference. His Rinnegan flashed with endless cold light, and Obito also put away the spiral sword in his hand. His cold eyes looked around the gradually peeling Chibaku Tensei. Obito's face was cold, his hands spread out, and his Rinnegan surged with endless strong repulsion. Boom boom boom, the invisible repulsive force spread out in all directions, crushing the surrounding rubble into powder. The huge Chibaku Tensei collapsed at an even more terrifying speed. Even Obito inside could vaguely see the clear sky outside. Boom boom boom. When Obito was about to completely crush the Chibaku Tensei, there was a sudden roar in front of him. The strong energy wave made him slightly stunned, and the mound under his feet trembled. Suddenly, an unprecedented sense of crisis welled up in his heart. Without hesitation, Obito controlled the truth-seeking ball and turned it into a circular black barrier in front of him. Puchi? At this moment, a sharp black iron spear suddenly penetrated the solid Chibaku Tensei, and appeared like a ghost. The straight tip of the arrow pulsed with a dark light, and anything that came in contact with it would vanish into thin air. Not good. Obito looked at the black iron spear that appeared out of thin air in astonishment. He could feel the horror of the arrow, and the essence of its power coincided with his truth-seeking ball. Immediately he worked even harder to reinforce the barrier in front of him. Obito wanted to use his Kamui to avoid the dark arrow, but because of the sudden appearance, there was not enough time to use Kamui to dodge his body. So, he just frantically reinforced the barrier in front of him, and that was all he could do. He hoped to resist the powerful attack of the black arrow and ensure his safety. But even if the ideal was beautiful, the reality was cruel. Kacha. Puchi. The moment the black enchantment came into contact with the arrow, it shattered and was immediately pierced through mercilessly. The tip of the arrow that was shining with black light directly pierced into Obito's chest. The tyrannical force directly nailed him to the rock wall. Dustless's painstaking attack took a long time. The previous Chibaku Tensei was just to pave the way for him. Now he was caught off guard and attacked suddenly. Naturally, Obito was not aware of it and was directly killed. After all, the difference in strength between the two was obvious. Compared to the poor Obito, Dustless could be said to be a real super nouveau riche, with all kinds of incredible Kekkei Genkai and thousands of abilities. It's over, Obito. Dustless turned into a photon and appeared next to Obito. His cold voice sounded, and he could clearly see that Obito's body was slowly collapsing. Even the abnormal recovery ability of the Jubi could not repair it completely. This was the horror of the truth-seeking Jade, it was simply irresistible. Just like the two opposite attributes of water and fire, once it came into contact with water, the fire attribute would naturally be extinguished. To some extent, the truth-seeking Jade was like the ultimate existence that destroyed the world, and ordinary people could not resist it at all. It's finally over. After a while, Obito's body completely dissipated and his breath disappeared. Dustless was relieved and sat down casually. His back was bent, his eyes were dim and his face was extremely pale. His whole person seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. Just now, after a series of fierce battles, Dustless consumed a lot of chakra in his body. If he couldn't kill Obito with that blow, then the one who would be killed would be Dustless. There was no other reason. Dustless did not have the existence of a bug like the Jubi. If he did, he would have unlimited chakra and could fight with Obito with all kinds of ninjutsu. The training is over. The figure of Obito that collapsed before gathered again and Dustless was shocked. After hearing the light voice, his tense nerves relaxed. Looking at the elegant girl in front of him, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief, and immediately asked with eagerness and expectation, "Obito has been killed by me, my body?" The words in his mouth stopped abruptly, and Dustless suddenly found that the empty chakra in his body was soaring at a speed that had never been seen before. At the same time, his body was also changing unconsciously. The hardness of his body and spiritual power were more than 100 times stronger, and his abilities in all aspects were much stronger. The dim eyes regained their luster, and Dustless instantly became 100 times more energetic. Chapter 286. Carefully savoring the changes in his body, Dustless choked with emotion. Especially when he sensed the vast and majestic chakra, his face showed a look of astonishment and joy. After taking a deep breath, he tried to keep his heart calm, but the corners of his eyes were still twitching slightly. This proved that Dustless's heart was not calm. It was like a shocking wave in a storm. What a terrifying amount! Is this the ancestor level of chakra? Slightly opening his eyes, Dustless was secretly shocked. The chakra in his body was almost limitless, like an inexhaustible sea. This carefree feeling made Dustless extremely comfortable, as if he was in the depths of the clouds, his whole body was floating. The rock hidden in the bottom of his heart also disappeared. His body was exceptionally refreshed, and the unprecedented pleasure made him unable to stop. But even with such a chakra content and a strong body, Kaguya seems to be no match for her enemy. She had to use infinite Tsukuyomi to create her own soldiers, White Zetsu. What a magical world with all kinds of forms. Suddenly recalling the enemy that Kaguya was afraid of, Dustless's heart inevitably sank. His current strength was still not comparable to Kaguya, and the enemy that Kaguya was once afraid of was 10 times stronger than him. Comparisons are odious, I can't compare. Laughing at himself, Dustless said bitterly. His eyes were filled with loneliness, lying on the ground and looking at the blue sky with lifeless eyes. As the saying goes, there is always a mountain beyond a man. The world in front of him is just an ordinary side of countless universes. In the two-dimensional world where gods fly everywhere, this world is nothing at all. Especially according to the memory that Dustless extracted from Wang Liang last time, the enemy that Kaguya was afraid of did not seem to belong to this world, and even Kaguya herself came from another place. In the end, Kaguya herself was also a thief who stole the power of the divine tree. It's rare to see you so sentimental. A black shadow covered the sky, and a cold voice entered his ears. Dustless, who was in a trance, came back to his senses. Staring at the exquisite and perfect face, Dustless's muddled expression became clear. What he saw was Ling, the embodiment of the consciousness of the system. No matter how strong you are, there will always be someone stronger. Humans are always vigilant in times of peace, and I am no exception. Sighing, Dustless shrugged and said helplessly, "You're the system's incarnation. Naturally, you wouldn't understand how I feel. Anyone would feel depressed if there was a guillotine hanging over their head." Whether it was Huey or his so-called enemy, they were both untouchable existences. And, didn't I take everything from Obito, including the Jubi in his body? But I can't summon the strongest tailed beast, the Jubi. You're cheating your customers and you'll go to jail. Dustless looked at the perfect face snappily. Facing Ling Er's indifferent gaze, he groaned in dissatisfaction. His tone was strange and he always felt that Ling Er was deliberately tricking him. He only got the Jubi's chakra, strong physique and vitality. As if amused by Dustless's strange voice, Ling Er's iceberg face bloomed with a rare smile, and the soul-stirring arc made Dustless gulp. "You're really whimsical. You've already got everything from the tailed beast and you still want the Jubi? If you don't wake up from your dream, I don't mind helping you wake up." Ling Er's beautiful and lively eyes stared at Dustless, blinking and said with a smile, "That's fine." Dustless's mouth twitched without a trace. He still can't forget the bitter years when he was beaten by Ling Er. Even if he now has the strength to contend with the gods, Dustless won't be stupid enough to think that he is Ling Er's opponent. The existence of the system is a manifestation of escaping the will of the world. Ling Er, who is not bound by the law, is naturally unprecedented. She can transform into any character at will, and defeating the opponent can give Dustless the ability to train the character. Thinking about it, one can know how terrible it is. In fact, Dustless also knows that he is greedy. After all, he inherited most of the abilities except that he can't transform into the god tree, Jubi. If he can summon the Jubi, it's unscientific. Ta-ta-ta. In the gloomy underground laboratory, there was a heavy and oppressive sound of footsteps, and in the dark corridor tunnel, it was even colder. Vaguely, it was a handsome black-haired boy with messy hair and a strong body, with a Kusanagi sword on his waist, and the invisible aura he exuded was even more terrible. It was Uchiha Sasuke. More than half a month has passed since the last incident. Sasuke wanted to kill Orochimaru and leave Oda Geikure. However, when he woke up from a coma, there was only a large white snake beside him. In fact, Orochimaru's clone had already sneaked into Sasuke's body, but he didn't know it. Sasuke, who realized that the strength gap between him and Dustless was too big, began to look for his companions. After all, Dustless and Itachi's strength were so untouchable, but they both had their own companions. He must do the same, swearing that he can't lose to the two rivals in any way. It was precisely because of Dustless's overwhelming strength that Sasuke uncharacteristically looked for his companions. The unfathomable strength of Dustless and Itachi shrouded him like a nightmare. Every time he slept, he seemed to be ridiculed by Itachi and Dustless. It was impossible for him to fight alone to surpass these two people, so he had to rely on the strength of others. It was also because of the relationship with Dustless that Sasuke attached great importance to the so-called companions. It should be here. The world in front of him suddenly turned into a giant laboratory. Staring at the giant pool in front of him, Sasuke slowly walked over and looked at the stagnant water in the pool expressionlessly. The stagnant water in the pool rippled as if it had sensed that someone was approaching. "It's time to show up, Suigetsu." Chapter 287. Now that Orochimaru has disappeared, Sasuke will naturally ruthlessly plunder his legacy, or simply plunder his subordinates. Although he doesn't like Orochimaru, it's undeniable that Orochimaru's subordinates are the elites of the elites. "You can come here," indicating that you have defeated Orochimaru. "You deserve to be called Sasuke." In the pool, the ripples suddenly became even more rapid. A man with a head full of silver hair walked out of the pool. He had jagged fangs. It's Hozuki Suigetsu. Oda Geikure is Orochimaru's territory. Since Sasuke can find him unscrupulously, it means that Orochimaru, the biggest obstacle, has been removed. That guy is missing. Whether he's dead or alive has nothing to do with me. Throwing the prepared clothes to Ghost Tsuki, Sasuke's voice was extremely indifferent. Regardless of the former's actions, he simply left. In short, there's no need to care about Orochimaru anymore. Even if he can come back from the dead, I will let him die again. In the dark space full of various containers, only Sasuke's cold voice was left. His current purpose is to gather enough companions and then start on the Akatsuki, to end the lives of those two bastards. The morning breeze was mighty, the air was fresh, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. Under the waterfall, the golden figure was training hard. Sweat stains had shredded his clothes, and several tanuki beards on both sides of his face were hanging with crystal drops. Damn, it's because I'm too weak. The golden-haired youth fiercely threw out the energy ball in his hand. The waterfall in front of him made a rumbling sound, and the water splashed all over the youth's body like a rainstorm. His deep blue eyes were filled with shock, murderous intent, and self-blame. The cold spring water soaked the blonde boy's body, and it seemed that only this could calm the anger in his heart. Naruto, I can understand your feelings. Yamato, who temporarily led Team 7's Umbu team, rushed over. After carefully observing Uzumaki Naruto, he was relieved. He patted Naruto's shoulder and comforted, Sasuke defeated you because he used Orochimaru's evil jutsu. There's no need to take this kind of thing to heart. Evil can't prevail over good. In the end you will surpass him. Yamato sighed. His words revealed a sense of helplessness. Whether it was good or bad, it was the motivation for people to become strong. At the same time, it was also where the devil's barrier lay. After the last incident, after Dustless and Zetsu left, Naruto also rushed to the scene in time, but he was still easily defeated by Sasuke. The two seemed to be in different dimensions and they had no power to fight back. I'm not as good as Sasuke. Naruto took a deep breath and said with a complicated tone. If he was a little stronger, he could capture Sasuke with brute force. Sasuke and Naruto were not only teammates but also competitors. After working hard for so many years, Naruto was not as good as Sasuke. Naturally, Naruto was unwilling. It's not your fault. Staring at Naruto's unwilling face, Yamato gently shook his head and said earnestly, hoping that Naruto's obsession with Sasuke wouldn't be too deep. After all, Sasuke has a blood feud and he can't be abandoned. Captain Yamato. After reorganizing his words, Yamato was about to persuade Naruto wholeheartedly when several figures suddenly fell from the sky, wearing black coats and Umbu masks of different shapes. Naturally, Konoha's Umbu could dress like this. The 5th Hokage ordered you to go to his office. There is a task for the 7th team. Several Umbu ninjas' tone was quite respectful. Yamato's status in the Umbu was not low, and he deserved their respect. Hearing this, Yamato's brows deeply frowned. He was quite worried. If it was an ordinary task, he might have already arranged for other ninjas to carry it out. The 7th team, which he was temporarily leading, naturally showed the seriousness of the task. Although Naruto has made some small achievements in his practice, he still has a long way to go. He needs more time to break in. It's too early to put Naruto on the mission in such a hurry. It will be over soon. You can go back first. Although he was dissatisfied, Yamato didn't dare to say it in front of these people. After all, the Hokage's face still needs to be taken care of. He can ask the 5th Hokage face to face. Several Umbu nodded slightly, and immediately their bodies lost their texture and disappeared in an instant. These Umbu ninjas were the elites of Konoha, and their strength was the best of the best. About half a quarter of an hour later, in the Hokage's office. The current Hokage was naturally the 5th Hokage, Tsunade Senju. Although she didn't like being the Hokage, under Naruto's words she could only bow down and willingly tie herself to Konoha's war chariot. Dustless, is this your choice? Looking at the peaceful village, Tsunade's eyes were full of complicated feelings. Her thoughts turned back, and it seemed that she went back to the days when they formed a team to fight against the Rock Village. The smiling face that always had a smile, once again came into view across time and space. Creak! The office door was gently pushed open and Tsunade's thoughts were pulled back. She saw Yamato and several members of the 7th team. Hokage-sama. Yamato frowned and whispered. For a moment he clearly saw the worry in Tsunade's eyes. He didn't have to think about it. Something unexpected must have happened. Kakashi's temporary 10th team encountered the 2 members of the Akatsuki organization. The situation seems to be bad and we need your support. The enemy should be the one who killed Asuma last time. After seeing the members of the 7th team arrive, Tsunade showed unprecedented decisiveness and ability. Without any nonsense, she went straight to the topic. It turned out that Asuma, the sensei who led the 10th team, was killed by the Akatsuki. The enemy was Haiden and Kakuzu. Chapter 288. Senju Tsunade was already in her 40s or 50s. Her skin was still very delicate, her face was smooth, and her body sometimes exuded a mature aura, giving people a feeling of a cool breeze. It made people relax involuntarily, and their anxious hearts gradually eased and settled down. As a leader, not only does she need a calm heart and absolute judgment, but she also needs the courage to stabilize the internal situation and be able to turn the muzzle at the critical moment. If even his own people can't calm him down, then this Hokage is undoubtedly a failure. Although Senju Tsunade looked a bit brainless, she was definitely a competent Hokage. She understood what it meant to stabilize the internal situation before resisting the external situation, and knew how to use it reasonably. This time, I will tear them into pieces to vent the hatred in my heart. After hearing the Akatsuki's words, Uzumaki Naruto's eyes immediately turned red, and said with a murderous aura, causing the surrounding air to drop to the freezing point. Due to the appearance of Dustless, Naruto hated this organization very much. It can even be said that he drank their blood and ate their flesh. Naruto, you are a ninja. You can't be controlled by your emotions. As a ninja, you can't perform tasks according to your emotions at any time. Seeing this, Yamato frowned and his eyes flashed with displeasure. When he was about to reprimand Naruto, he fell silent after seeing the indignation in his eyes. It was difficult for him to speak. It doesn't matter. The task this time is to tear the enemy into pieces. Senju Tsunade showed an unusual indifference, and her expression was unusually ferocious. The Akatsuki was full of all kinds of S-class rebellious ninjas. They were used to doing bad things. It was impossible to make them turn back. There was no need to be kind to this kind of person, just tear him apart like a beast. Hokage, forget it, I don't need to worry about this kind of thing. Yamato intended to persuade Tsunade, but he was repulsed by her ferocious eyes. He could only smile bitterly, and the melancholy in his heart disappeared. Perhaps, as Tsunade said, the enemy this time is the kind of ruthless and bloodthirsty. They only need to pay attention to the most simple and direct violence. Tear the enemy into pieces. Naruto. Haruno Sakura looked at Uzumaki Naruto with a complicated expression. Her gem-like eyes dimmed and she felt extremely guilty. Compared to Naruto and Sasuke, she has been dragging the team behind. She clenched her fists tightly and at the same time she looked firmly at Tsunade. Tsunade was now her master. On the other hand, the pale-skinned Sasai was expressionless and looked very calm. He, Naruto, and Haruno Sakura had already buried the hatchet. But in his heart, he still had doubts about the so-called fetters. It's no wonder that Sasai has such an idea. He joined the Root clan since he was a child. It can be said that he has witnessed the ugliness of human nature. It's too difficult for him to integrate into the relationship between Sasuke and Naruto. Recognition did not mean that they could abandon the gap between them. All of this required time to get used to each other. That's the only way. Yamato shook his head. He was also aware of the contradictions of the new Team 7. Although they had already severed their rivalry with each other, the fundamental problem was still there. Only the heavens knew if they would be able to work together intimately. Inside the brightly lit room, a round table was filled with delicious delicacies. Hot air billowed from the food, and a rich aroma wafted out from the food. Oh, is it my illusion? A frivolous and surprised voice rang out, and a young man in a white robe stepped in. He lifted his nose and sniffed the fragrance in the air without caring about his image. Looking at the dazzling array of dishes on the table, his eyes lit up and his fingers moved. He directly appeared in front of the table in a flash. He didn't even pick up the chopsticks, he just reached out and grabbed them. Pa! A beautiful figure rushed over and mercilessly left a dark red handprint on Dustless's hand. She stared at Dustless and said with disdain, "In the past, the Uchiha were also a top noble clan. As the son of the patriarch, you don't even know etiquette. I'm really worried about your parents." While scolding Dustless, Ulua was always so elegant. Her white legs were exposed and she stood there gracefully, showing the temperament that a lady should have. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have that kind of noble temperament. I'm the king of grass in troubled times." Dustless stared at Ulua and said with dissatisfaction, "And the master of this family should be me." However, when the word parents was mentioned, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of sadness. Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku were saved by him using the outer path, Rinsei Tensei. It has been several years since they last saw each other. I think they are also living in seclusion. Shaking his head, Dustless was too lazy to pay attention to them. As long as their lives are not in danger, everything is fine. Living freely in seclusion is also not a bad thing. Sit down, we can't leave you out, Red Lotus. Pulling the slender Hinata over, Yuluo greeted Red Lotus, who was quite reserved, and motioned her to come and sit down. After all, this table of delicacies was prepared by her. Dustless had a strange expression on his face when he heard this. In a trance, he thought that this was a snake dinner. Sit down, Red Lotus, we are all family, there is no need to be so concerned. With a gentle smile, Dustless said very casually. Although he verbally said that Red Lotus was his subordinate, in fact, he has already regarded her as a close existence similar to family. Seeing Dustless speak, Red Lotus struggled for a while and sat down obediently. In the spacious room, the cool evening breeze blew, and the four people ate their dinner peacefully. Of course, compared to Dustless, who was wolfing down the food, the other three women's behavior was much more elegant. Chapter 289. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Dustless hugged Yuluo and disappeared. Hinata and Red Lotus blushed. They didn't need to be said to know what it meant. Women in this world matured much earlier. Some things were understood at the age of 12 or 13. After eating and drinking, one would think about sex. This didn't need to be explained, even the young Hinata understood what it meant. Red Lotus looked at Dustless thoughtfully. Although Yuluo's face was full of struggle, and she was beating Dustless fiercely, trying to show a reluctant look, her inner joy could still be seen. As for why she could see the joy in her heart, there was no other reason, it was all a woman's natural intuition. He had to say that this little girl was very concerned about her face, especially in front of Hinata and Red Lotus. She deliberately maintained her reserve, which made Dustless couldn't help but have the idea of teasing Yuluo. Yuluo-sama and Dustless-sama are a good match, very. Her bright and resplendent eyes dimmed. Even though Yuluo had never mentioned her origins, it wasn't hard to tell that Yuluo's family background wasn't ordinary from her aura, her self-cultivation, and the pressure that came from being in a high position for a long time. Dustless was the eldest son of the former Uchiha clan's patriarch, and his strength was unprecedented, so the two were naturally well matched. Red Lotus Nasan is really cunning. Although she was young, Hinata wasn't the kind of girl who knew everything. She had followed Yuluo for many years and she already knew a lot of ancient secrets. She was no longer the simple and ignorant Hyuga Hinata, and her mind had changed a lot. As for Uzumaki Naruto, when talking about him, Hinata's expression was slightly calm, and even hid a little indifference. Red Lotus glanced at Hinata angrily and didn't say much. She silently watched the two leave, and her shining eyes obviously dimmed. Staring at the untouchable moon hanging high in the sky, Red Lotus's eyes dimmed even more. She was alone and it was particularly bleak. In fact, as Hinata and Red Lotus imagined, Dustless and Yuluo did have a fierce time, and it wasn't until late in the afternoon that the creaking sound stopped. What kind of monster are you? Your physical strength is so strong. Deep in the midnight, Yuluo stared at Dustless and tried to stand up. The tingling pain from her lower body made her pretty face pale. She stared at him angrily and her cheeks bulged and she rolled her eyes, which was very cute. However, Dustless ignored Yuluo, and his words directly made her vomit blood. We're already an old couple, why are you still pretending to be pure? Anyway, I don't buy it. Wuxia curled his lips and said with extreme disdain. He had not forgotten Yuluo's appearance earlier. His expression suddenly returned to normal and he said, has there been any movement from Black Zetsu recently? If there's one person that Dustless is most worried about, it's undoubtedly Black Zetsu. This old guy is shrouded in mystery and he's very mysterious. Although his strength performance is not satisfactory, he doesn't know if he has any powerful life-saving cards. Seeing Dustless talking about business, Yuluo's expression also returned to normal, and she said in a deep voice, he's been very stable recently, obeying Pain's orders all day long, and he's also very honest. He didn't show his fierce fangs and he knows his place. Hearing this, Dustless shook his head. This old guy looks harmless on the surface, but in fact he's insidious and cunning. He always hides his sharp claws. Once the sharp claws are exposed, any creature will completely wither in front of him. Don't underestimate him. After thousands of years of precipitation, he already knows the root of the concept of human nature, so he can let the whole world live in his script, including you and me. Dustless said heavily. Black Zetsu's task of calculating the heaven and earth is absolutely not to be underestimated. The thread of discussion suddenly changed and he asked Yuluo calmly, what about Pain's movements? Of course, there's also my stupid brother Uchiha Itachi. After the end of the training, Dustless calmly rested for a few days. He must know the root of the Akatsuki organization. After talking for half an hour, Yuluo explained the recent movements of Akatsuki. Itachi's body really can't go on. A light suddenly flashed in his mind. Dustless sighed. He originally thought that with his appearance, Itachi's body wouldn't collapse so quickly, but he didn't expect this kind of thing to happen. It seems that the power of Dustless's butterfly wings is not big enough. Did you change your expression wrongly? It shouldn't be this "I knew it" expression. At the very least you should pretend to be sad. Yuluo said speechlessly as he looked at Wu Qin, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. His younger brother had a terminal illness. Even if he did not cry out loud, he should at least show some grief instead of having such an expression. Sadness? Hearing this, Dustless rolled his eyes, glanced at Yuluo and sneered, "That kid can't wait for me to die so that he can remove the obstacles for Sasuke. In his eyes he only has Sasuke, his younger brother, and doesn't take me, his elder brother, to heart. He's just on guard." Dustless shook his head. Itachi treated everyone well, but he didn't like his elder brother, and even secretly guarded against him all day long. "It's because you're too dangerous, you can't blame others." Yuluo was very open-minded, and seemed to understand why Itachi was on guard against Dustless. In the face of the sea monsters with fangs lurking in the deep sea, if they weren't careful, they would be the last ones to be swallowed. "Am I so terrible?" Looking at Yuluo with a wry smile, Dustless was too lazy to explain. He also felt that he wasn't a good person, but so what? Instead of being a hypocrite who suffered a lot, Dustless felt that the identity of a peerless evil was more suitable for him. Good people don't live long, bad people live for thousands of years. This is an unchanging truth. Chapter 290. For example, a peerless evil like Otsutsuki Kagaya, even if she stole the fruit of the god tree and was sealed in the end, she was still the one who had the last laugh. From a mortal to a godlike existence, regardless of success or failure, Kagaya was already a winner in life. Therefore Dustless also looked at the so-called justice and evil with contempt. In the dense forest, two silhouettes were walking alone. They were wearing wooden bamboo hats, and the white ribbons on the hats were all small bells. When they walked they would make a pleasant sound. Those two zombie duo are really messing around. They deserve to be killed for violating Pain's order. Dustless and White Zetsu walked side by side, looking at the several figures in front of them, frowning slightly. The cold luster from their pupils seemed to be able to crush the void, giving the outside a terrifying gloominess. Even Dustless, who was standing beside him, felt as if he had fallen into hell at that moment. Damn, it's only been a few days but this kid's strength seems to have improved again. Bastard, how did he do it? The corner of Heiju's mouth twitched fiercely. He cursed in his heart. Wu Chen's murderous aura left him an eternal and indelible memory. As the saying goes, a cornered dog will jump over the wall. At this moment, Black Zetsu was like an ant on a hot pan. Although his heart was particularly irritable and depressed, he still kept calm for the first time. It's not impossible to become stronger, but at least there is a limit. Becoming stronger without limit is not something normal humans can do. Even Otsutsuki Kagaya has her own limit. The casual look just now, and the uncontrollable murderous aura that leaked out made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and he couldn't help but shiver. "I haven't seen you for a while and Dustless-sama seems to be a lot stronger. In this case our plan is more secure." Compared to Black Zetsu, who was good at playing tricks, White Zetsu was much simpler. He just hoped that the Eye of the Moon plan could be completed quickly, and then resurrected Uchiha Madara to release the Dream Jutsu to the world, Infinite Tsukuyami. "I don't want to wait any longer. Let's start the plan as soon as we're done," Dustless said thoughtfully as he stared at the few figures in front of him. He had also completely thrown away the restraints in his heart. Instead of waiting for death, he might as well take the initiative to attack and seize the initiative in this battle. Looking up, the people in front of him were Haiden and Kakuzu, as well as Konoha's Team 7 and Team 7. Especially Terumi Mei, who was his ally. As for the final Infinite Tsukuyami Genjutsu, it was not something Dustless could deal with. The so-called covenant didn't exist at all. In the end, the nature of this world was survival of the fittest. Since Mei couldn't survive, she couldn't save the Mist Village. "Should I get rid of all these small fries?" "Forget it, it's useless for small fries to live anyway. I'll just let them live on and enjoy the rest of their lives. Raising his eyelids and looking at Konoha's ninja with pity, Wuxia sneered expressionlessly. His pupils were like an ancient well without the emotions that a human should have. He was like a sculpture and his body was isolated from the world. People were selfish and Dustless was no exception. He only hoped that the people he cared about could live well. As for the life and death of others, it had nothing to do with him. I can't go on like this, I must find a way to contain this kid. The murderous light in his eyes disappeared in a flash, and Black Setsu's mind was spinning rapidly. If he let Dustless continue to strengthen without limit, in the end he wouldn't be able to defeat Dustless. Boom! Violent chakra waves suddenly exploded, and strong air waves blew all the leaves in the forest. Looking up, it was the two sides that had already started fighting. At present, Konoha's ninjas were temporarily at a disadvantage. After all, Haiden and Kakuzu were both powerful ninjas, and they were able to join the Akatsuki. It doesn't seem good. We are here to collect the corpses of Haiden and Kakuzu, not Konoha's ninjas. White Setsu abandoned his position and began to worry about Konoha's ninjas. Black Setsu was speechless. Shaking his head, Black Setsu was too lazy to talk nonsense. They were indeed here to collect the corpses of Haiden and Kakuzu. This is very simple. If Konoha's ninjas can't do it, just like how we killed Sasori, we will personally end their lives. A strange smile swept the corner of his mouth, and the cold light in his eyes suddenly condensed, shooting out cold light. Dustless's killing intent was awe-inspiring. As for Haiden and Kakuzu, they were originally used to capture the bijou. Now that they have all gathered, only Nibi and Kyubi are left. These S-class ninjas are insignificant. Dustless, Sama is still as cold as ever, but this is a suitable way for them to die. White Setsu said with a mocking smile. Looking at the zombie duo Kakuzu and Fei Duan, he was looking forward to seeing if these two undead guys could remain calm in front of Dustless's words. But Dustless, Sama doesn't seem to have a chance to make a move. Konoha's support may have already arrived. After a long silence, White Setsu suddenly said with a tone of pity, because within his perception range, Konoha's ninjas have already arrived, and the number was not small. Dustless maintained a calm expression, and his expression didn't change. Obviously, he had already expected that Konoha's ninjas would come to support. After all, Haiden and Kakuzu were S-class ninjas, and Konoha's side was just Team 10 led by Kakashi and Asuma. Only by sending new ninjas to support can they maintain the victory. Chapter 291. The oppressive atmosphere quietly spread, and the two opposing forces were obviously in a life-and-death struggle. Even top-level powerhouses like Haiden and Kakuzu couldn't help but tense up in the face of Konoha's ninja. There is a saying that the king of hell is easy to deal with, but the little devil is difficult to deal with. What he said was not unreasonable. Team 10 was originally an intelligent ninja, and their own Haiden's brain was not very good, and his character was reckless, and he died as soon as he came on the field. However, Haiden had an immortal body, and this kind of ordinary physical attack was ineffective against him. Even if the previous attack had cut off his head, with the help of Kakuzu, he still miraculously succeeded in resurrecting. After resurrecting with full blood, Haiden's expression was extremely arrogant, and his smug smile was particularly annoying. This kid is still surprisingly annoying. Wu Chen's indifferent expression stiffened. Seeing Fei Duan being so arrogant, Wu Chen's face twitched without a trace. Fei Duan in front of him was so annoying that he couldn't help but want to beat him up. Not to mention that he killed someone else's teacher, he even showed off in front of his apprentices, which was really hateful. His ability is really weird, incredible, I can't help but want to dissect him. White Setsu looked at Haiden with a strange light in his eyes. He was a professional zombie and he had seen all kinds of corpses, but he had never seen an immortal like Haiden. His ability is good, but unfortunately his death is also the most tragic. Recalling the tragic end of Haiden's dismembered body and buried alive, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. The most heaven-defying ability was also the most tragic end. Because Haiden was cursed, his body wouldn't die, so he was still alive even after being buried alive. He could only die slowly in the cave because of the stench of his body. It was self-evident how miserable his end was. Boom, 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 a strong wave of air spread out, and a huge pit suddenly appeared on the ground that was still intact before. Haiden, a powerful humanoid beast, was not comparable to the kid of Team 10. Shadowbind Jutsu. Seizing the opportunity, Shikamaru Nara immediately used the Nara clan's secret technique to restrain Haiden. Due to the secrecy, of course, Hayden's own carelessness could not be ruled out. Soon, he was bound by the elongated black shadow on the ground, and his body could not move according to his will. Kakuzu frowned when he saw this. He looked at the shadow on the ground that was connected to Hayden's body with surprise. His face was full of interest. He could see Hayden's body moving uncontrollably. Kakuzu looked at Shikamaru, who was sweating profusely. Kakuzu looked at Shikamaru with great interest. His expression was inevitably filled with greed. This kind of technique that could control others without them knowing was a rare secret technique. Get out of my way, Kakuzu. I can't control my body. Looking in the direction of the sound, he saw Fei Duan waving his long and narrow three-part scythe as he sped over. The cold light flashed as it cut through iron like it was mud, erasing and splitting any matter that came into contact with it. The target of the attack was Kakuzu. You can control Hayden to attack me. It's a good bloodstain, but it's useless. Looking at Shikamaru Nara, who was sweating profusely, Kakuzu then turned his head and stared at Hayden without fear. His expression was as usual, filled with eternal indifference. Pay the price for your arrogance. Shikamaru Nara's eyes were filled with killing intent. Deep in the ground, the black shadow was rushing toward Kakuzu's feet. Asuma was Shikamaru's teacher and friend. Now that he could kill the enemy with his own hands, his heart was particularly happy. Ka. When Kakuzu was about to dodge Hayden's attack, the ground under his feet suddenly cracked. The dark shadow was like a spirit snake that wrapped around his feet tightly, making him unable to move. Hayden's scythe was about to split Kakuzu into two. Hey. They can't be so useless, it's too funny to be killed like this. White Zetsu's face was full of disbelief. After seeing that Kakuzu was tightly bound, he exclaimed out loud. Kakuzu and Hayden were just teasing them. If they were killed by a group of hairy brats, the S-class ninjas would be too worthless. Black Zetsu didn't care, the other party was just a group of hairy brats. I may disappoint you, Black Zetsu. They were really killed by this group of brats. Dustless heard this and smiled. He scoffed at Black Zetsu's words. Kakuzu and Hayden were indeed killed by Team 10 and 7, especially Hayden's death was the most tragic. Dustless looked at the zombie duo with pity. The end of these two people was already doomed. Even if Dustless didn't need to do it himself, the end result would be death. In the future they will become a member of the Edo Tensei army. Let's go, Zetsu. Dustless simply retracted his gaze and directly turned to leave. These two people were doomed to fall here. White Zetsu only needed to leave some clones to collect their corpses. It's a pity that this was a good show. White Zetsu reluctantly retracted his gaze and followed Dustless's footsteps. Of course, he left his clones in advance. After all, he still needs the corpses of these two people for future plans. Hiss. Dustless, who had just turned around and was about to leave, suddenly heard a faint hissing sound. Looking around, he saw a figure in a red robe standing quietly behind him. This person's attire was extremely disgusting. His skin was deathly pale and he wore transparent glasses. His skin was like the scales of a snake, and the thick white snake behind him crawled out of his body. The hissing sound came from the snake's forked mouth. How could it be him, and he seems to have learned sage techniques? Frowning, Dustless secretly thought. The person who came was Orochimaru's former subordinate, Kabuto. Ah no, maybe now he should change his name, he should be called Kabuto. Chapter 292. At this moment, Kabuto's appearance was extremely disgusting. The crystal scales were clearly visible, his body was white, and he liked to stick out his tongue and lick his lips like Orochimaru. The dark red thick robe covered Kabuto's body, blocking the invasion of the sun, and snakes like dark and humid places, and Kabuto doesn't like to live in the sun. There is a road to heaven but you don't walk, there is no door to hell, you have a lot of courage, the subordinates of a traitor, and you dare to come to the door, you have a lot of courage. After seeing the figure hidden under the robe, Black Zetsu's face changed dramatically, and after staring at Kabuto for a long time he said with a strange smile, "Poor Orochimaru calculated for a lifetime, and in the end it was easy for you. It's really ironic." The success and failure of Orochimaru came from the hands of Kabuto. I'm afraid that Orochimaru didn't expect that everything he did in his life was for others. This old guy is really good at acting. It's a pity that the Best Actor award is not given to him. Wu Qin secretly glanced at Heiju and secretly smacked his tongue. Black Zetsu was a natural performer, deceiving people all over the world. Whether it was acting or the essence of the performance, he played the skills of an actor incisively and vividly. Perhaps in front of Dustless and Madara, Black Zetsu regarded himself as an insignificant person, and the identity of Kagaya's third son was probably long gone. Acting could only be considered to have reached the pinnacle of perfection when one acted until they believed it to be true. I don't like to beat around the bush, say what you want, Kabuto. His eyes fell on Kabuto's body, Dustless asked. His momentum was restrained, blending with nature, and his voice was slightly vicissitudes of life. So strong. Big Snake Pocket under the thick robe frowned slightly, and the corner of his eyes flashed with a strange color. The snake eyes narrowed, carefully sizing up Dustless. After a while they suddenly emitted a cold light. My answer is, of course, to take your life. The squinted pupils suddenly opened, shooting a cold killing intent, and then Kabuto's body lost its texture, leaving a faint afterimage in the place where he originally stood. As for the main body, with just this level of skill he was already close to Dustless. How fast? How can a mere peddler have such amazing strength? Not only was White Zetsu shocked, but even the usually silent Black Zetsu had a look of disbelief. His eyes widened and he looked at Do in surprise. When he looked up, his vicious gaze was even more vicious than Orochimaru's in the past. Oh, a hiss. The ferocious white snake went straight for Dustless's face. It opened its bloody mouth and exposed its sharp fangs. Under the sunlight, the fangs gleamed coldly. They could easily bite through steel. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. I didn't expect that. Not only did you seize everything from Orochimaru, you even learned the immortal techniques that he couldn't learn. You actually had the means to persuade that old snake. It seems that you're not bad, kid. Poochie. A sharp golden light shot out from his finger, and directly smashed the snake's head into a bloody mess. At the same time, Dustless's eyes emitted a cold light, and his killing intent began to soar. Chakra went berserk, overflowing with a huge breath of life. Really a troublesome monster. Looking at the broken snake head, Kabuto snorted, and his body quickly retreated. His hands formed a seal, and the majestic chakra in his body began to surge. When he was about to use a technique to capture Dustless, thick branches and vines suddenly drilled out from under his feet, and tightly bound him like a python. This is Mokutan. No, this is Mokutan. His doubtful expression turned into determination and certainty, and Kabuto's face lit up. In the past, Orochimaru used Hashirama cells to do experiments, and he also had some understanding of Mokutan. Worthy of being the monster that Orochimaru-sama can only sigh in his heart, you even have such a powerful Kekkei Genkai like Mokutan. Noticing the green vines binding his body, Kabuto wasn't stingy with his praise. Mokutan and Dustless working together was definitely the perfect combination. Sure enough, he awakened Mokutan. White and Black Zetsu were unusually calm. Dustless used to cooperate with Uchiha Madara, and a large number of Hashirama cells were integrated into his body, so it was normal that he could use Mokutan. You want to absorb my chakra? How can I let you do as you wish? Slightly frowning, Kabuto was surprised that the green vines binding his body were swallowing chakra, and he sneered again and again, looking at Dustless, his eyes filled with pride and contempt, and his body strangely melted. Like melting ice, his 1-meter-tall body turned into a puddle of water in the blink of an eye. Orochimaru-sama collected the Kekkei Genkai of various clans, and there is a lot of content. In fact, many years ago Orochimaru began to plan to have the same ability as you, Uchiha Dustless. The puddle of water on the ground rippled and quickly shrank, turning into a figure with dense scales all over his body. There was no doubt that it was Kabuto. Now, my body is an existence beyond human knowledge. You can't hurt me and you can't kill me. Kabuto looked at the indifferent Dustless, raised his arms and shouted loudly. His tone was unprecedentedly arrogant. Only Dustless had the ability to be immune to all physical attacks, and from now on, Kabuto would be the second person to have it. This was the power of science. There is no trick in the world that can be absolutely immune to physical attacks, including my ability. Dustless just faintly shook his head. Even if he didn't need Haki, as long as the mysterious power of gravity appeared, the invincibility of the fruit would be broken. A mere Hozuki clan's water transformation jutsu dares to say that you are immune to all attacks. Should I say that you are ignorant or naive? I'm afraid that even Orochimaru wouldn't dare to boast as shamelessly as you. It seems that after successfully practicing Sage Mode, you have forgotten how much you are worth, Kabuto. Chapter 293. Kabuto just frowned at Dustless's words. Not only did he have the water transformation jutsu that could easily ignore physical attacks, but he also investigated Uzumaki Karen's body and implanted the cells of the Uzumaki's body into his body. As long as he was injured, he would be able to recover. With the strongest ninjutsu that could ignore physical attacks, and a body that could recover when injured, Kabuto didn't think that he was worse than Dustless. You have a sharp tongue, it's useless to show off, I will capture you and turn you into the most perfect material. Kabuto stared at Dustless ferociously. Including Zetsu, they were all perfect experimental materials, none of them could escape. His snake eyes narrowed slightly, and Kabuto's line of sight locked onto Dustless. His calm and natural appearance made Kabuto particularly angry. He had a feeling of being treated as a small character not worth mentioning. In a battle between powerhouses, one should be completely focused, and not so calm and composed as if Kabuto Orochi was already in his grasp. First of all, Kabuto's temperament was completely defeated. Since your physique is immune to physical attacks, then how about this? Seeing Kabuto not moving for a long time, Dustless obviously lost his patience and changed from defense to offense. Chakra surged in his body, and in less than a second, a blazing fire wave came out of his mouth. Fire release, great fire annihilation. The flames reached a diameter of tens of meters, and the temperature increased by hundreds of times. The blazing high temperature evaporated all the flowers and trees, turning them into ashes. Under such high temperature, even water could only evaporate into nothingness. How can this guy's attainments in fire release be so high? His face was filled with shock. His eyes were wide open and his mind was in chaos. Facing such a terrifying sea of fire, his entire soul was trembling. His hair stood on end as he looked at the boundless sea of fire in disgust. At the same time, he was desperately erupting chakra in his body. The so-called jutsu that could ignore physical attacks was forgotten. What a joke, such a terrifying flame would only evaporate faster if it turned into water. What a powerful nature chakra. But this guy's speed of entering sage mode is really fast. Dustless's eyes narrowed as he felt the natural power rushing through the air. Ninjas like Jiraiya and Namikaze Minato needed a certain amount of time to enter sage mode, but Kabuto only took a very short time. Senjutsu, no chance reincarnation. The lifeless charred ground suddenly surged, as if it had been given life in an instant. It began to rise rapidly, turning into an abnormally strong wall, tightly protecting the snake within. It was like an iron bucket that was watertight. The flames outside was suddenly blocked and couldn't move forward and could only burn in front of the large wall, and burned it black. After a long while, the grand flame gradually extinguished. Kabuto Cave Senjutsu is really good. Dustless nodded secretly and his pupils splashed with faint ripples. Looking directly at the defensive wall formed in the blink of an eye, he couldn't help but think highly of Kabuto Cave's senjutsu. It was obvious that the group of unassuming snakes were quite capable. Dustless understood the effect of this jutsu in his previous life. It can give life to inanimate objects, and it is a reincarnation ninjutsu that can be controlled. It is not a simple ninjutsu that uses chakra to control objects, and under the effect of this jutsu, the inanimate objects move quickly. But that's it. Raising his eyelids, the corner of his mouth raised a contemptuous arc. Dustless looked calm, and he didn't put the iron wall in his eyes at all, and he threw out countless dense golden light. Yasukani no Magatama. The golden energy tide surged forward and the sturdy city walls were immediately eroded by the golden light. Dust flew up and the previously intact walls were now filled with holes. The holes were like the stars in the sky. It was impossible to count how many holes there were. Boom boom boom. The wall finally fell to the ground. Dustless's cruel attack just now gave it a fatal injury, and it no longer had the ability to defend. Just one move is enough to deal with it. What a monster, but it seems I didn't choose the wrong partner. Seeing the defensive wall that was controlled by senjutsu being destroyed in a snap of a finger, Kabuto's eyes not only didn't have any fear, but instead flashed with a dense light, and he stared at Dustless with fanatical eyes, especially his fearless and ant-like eyes, which made Kabuto even more determined. Staring at Dustless with malicious intent, the majestic chakra continued to pour out, and Kabuto showed no signs of stopping. Rumble? Accompanied by a loud rumbling sound, the ground under Dustless's feet suddenly surged, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, madly and rapidly rotating, forming a huge black hole that swallowed Dustless. And on the other side of the black hole was the door to the underworld. Giving life to something that doesn't have life. Looks like it's the same senjutsu as before. Dustless jumped up and stared at the earth whirlpool below and couldn't help but frown. The huge whirlpool swallowed everything around it, as if it was an ancient demon god that had been given life, and if it couldn't taint it, then it couldn't reincarnate. This person is very ambitious, getting rid of him now might not be a bad thing. His eyes flashed with anger. Dustless decided to get rid of Kabuto, this eyesore. It was not a good thing to let such an ambitious person live. Especially Kabuto's ambition was not inferior to Obito and Madara. He wanted to become a legendary dragon. Dragons were actually no different from gods and belonged to the category of legendary existences. In other words, those who wanted to become dragons actually wanted to become gods. You think you can step on thousands of living beings and show off your prowess? Dream on. He sneered at Kabuto. The murderous aura in Dustless's eyes became deeper and deeper. His scarlet eyes shot out a hellish bloody aura. The evil eternal Mangekyo Sharingan focused on Kabuto's body, and the corners of his mouth rose into an evil smile. Orochimaru's death is very suitable for you. Chapter 294. Gently raising his eyes, looking at Dustless in the sky, Kabuto finally understood Orochimaru's feelings. The most tragic thing in the world is this: a perfect specimen is right in front of you, but you're helpless to find that you don't have the ability to dissect the perfect specimen. It's really a tragedy. It's not too late to try again. In short, I can't let go of such a rare opportunity. After hesitating for a moment, Kabuto was resolute and decisive. The cooked duck was leaving him just like that. How could Kabuto be willing to do that? Chakra gushed out, and just as he was about to fight with Dustless again, his body suddenly burned with black flames. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan? It's really strong. The intense burning pain spread all over his body, and Kabuto was slightly stunned, looking at the black flames burning on his back. His face was full of surprise, and the desire in his eyes was undisguised. The power of the Sharingan is known throughout the world, especially Dustless's eyes. It's even more difficult to estimate. This kind of power is something that everyone wants. Orochimaru was like that, and now Kabuto, who inherited everything from him, was no exception. But how can this kind of flame burn me? I'm a snake sage. Glancing at the black flames on his back, Kabuto showed a contemptuous smile, and immediately the skin on his back suddenly dried and cracked, and the black flames slowly fell off, still molting. The substitution jutsu is very useful. Dustless, who was floating in the sky, slightly frowned. The substitution jutsu is the best ninjutsu to resist the Amaterasu. Orochimaru and Sasuke used this jutsu to resist the erosion of the Amaterasu again and again. I didn't expect this little bug to have some skills. Dustless looked down at Kabuto's ugly face with a smile, and said indifferently. Looking at Kabuto, he showed a teasing smile like a cat playing with a mouse. That kind of look is really unpleasant. Raising his eyebrows, Kabuto's pale face suddenly became gloomy. Dustless's smile made his whole body uncomfortable. It was obviously a hunter in high spirits teasing a dying prey. Do you still think I'm the same small character from before? In the past he was just Orochimaru's subordinate. To put it bluntly, he was just Orochimaru's henchman. However, things were very different now. Kabuto was naturally one of the protagonists of this world. Whether it was his current strength or his trump cards, they were all better than Orochimaru. Dustless was still looking at him like an ant. How could he be angry? His body once again gathered rich of natural chakra. You're asking for it? Seeing Kabuto's nature power gather, Wu Qin sneered even more. Kabuto dared to show off his immortal technique in front of him. He really didn't know where his confidence came from. But you already have no chance, Kabuto? Looking down indifferently at Kabuto, who was eager to give it a try, Dustless put his hands together and the boundless chakra gushed out again. Just as he was about to give him a fatal blow, Kabuto's voice sounded, and his words were shocking. Dustless didn't recover for a long time. Why don't we try to cooperate? Kabuto stared at Dustless, his words shocking everyone. His tone was like an ancient well, calm and composed. His confident appearance made people unable to help but be stunned. Fuku's confident appearance clearly showed that he was in the bag. Hearing this, Dustless just looked indifferently at Kabuto, then closed his eyes. After a moment of silence he suddenly asked, "The people who want to cooperate with me are like carp crossing the river. Unfortunately your name isn't among them, Kabuto." Raising his eyes, Dustless looked at Kabuto indifferently, and refused without hesitation. Kabuto? That's a pretty good name. Kabuto's eyes flashed, and looking at Dustless's eyes he said bluntly, of the people who want to cooperate with you, I'm naturally one of them, and I'm going to be your most important partner. His tone was full of confidence. Kabuto wasn't worried about whether Dustless would agree to the alliance or not. He could see that Dustless was the kind of person with ambition. He absolutely wouldn't refuse to cooperate with him because of personal grudges. Kabuto and Dustless's goal was almost the same. They both wanted to conquer the world. Wishful thinking. Indifferently looking at Kabuto, Dustless sneered in his heart. Precisely because the two of them had the same goal, Dustless couldn't cooperate with this kind of person. Especially in this situation, he could take advantage of this opportunity to kill him. If you and I cooperate, there are only a few dozen S-class ninjas in Akatsuki, the rest of them have almost no fighting power. I can use my subordinates to make up for your manpower, Kabuto said confidently, as if he was sure that Dustless would agree, but he was doomed to be disappointed. I'm sorry to disappoint you, I'm not interested in cooperating with you. Your so-called subordinates should be the legacy of Orochimaru, the strong corpses he plundered. Although it's very tempting, but don't you think that as long as I kill you, I can get everything from you? Staring indifferently at Kabuto, Dustless asked with a murderous aura. His majestic murderous aura wasn't concealed at all. The terrifying murderous aura directly dyed the entire sky into a gloomy blood-red color, as if a god was enraged. The entire world was pervaded with an unprecedented pressure. Kabuto just smiled. He had an important bargaining chip, and the Kage corpses were just appetizers. What came next was the main course. I'll give you the heaviest main course. Kabuto smiled strangely and suddenly made a hand seal. The ground also burst open, and an ancient coffin broke out from the depths of the ground, filling the air with the smell of decay. Chapter 295. The ancient coffin came into view, and it was filled with the smell of time. At first glance, one could tell that it wasn't an ordinary thing, especially the ancient aura on it. Even after the passage of many years, the invincible aura lingering on it could still be felt vaguely. There was no need to think about it to know who was in the coffin. Only Hashirama and Madara had such a level of power. Now that the corpses of Hashirama and other Hokage were in Dustless's hands, it was self-evident who was in the coffin. Uchiha Madara. No wonder I couldn't find him for so long, he actually ran into this kid's hands. Dustless's eyes were like torches. He was sure that the person in the coffin was definitely Madara. Kakaka. As if he was afraid that Dustless didn't know who was in the coffin, Kabuto snorted, and the lid of the coffin suddenly fell off, revealing a very young middle-aged man. The person sleeping in the coffin had black hair, handsome facial features, and was wearing dark red armor. Even if he was just lying quietly, he was showing a domineering aura. There was no doubt that it was Uchiha Madara. Damn Black Zetsu. Seeing this, Dustless cursed in his heart. He knew that Black Zetsu deliberately gave this to Kabuto. Whereas Madara's body, Black Zetsu is the only one in the world who knows. This old guy didn't want to help Madara from the beginning, he just wanted to use him. Is my strength enough to make you trust me so much? You really are the kind of person who understands the importance of caution. Fine, I will fulfill your wish and cooperate with this brat once. Let's see who will have the last laugh. Dustless began to plan to cooperate with Kabuto. This kid controlled a large number of Edo Tensei. If he didn't pull him to his side, there would be a lot of trouble. Even if the Edo Tensei army was useless to Dustless, White Zetsu was the natural enemy of the Edo Tensei. That's the only way. The corner of his eyes swept past Kabuto. Dustless made a decision. Although there was the suspicion of asking a tiger for its skin, with Kabuto's small appetite, it would be 100 years before he could swallow Dustless. There's no problem with working together, but, staring at Kabuto's face, Dustless snorted, too lazy to talk nonsense, and said coldly, I still can't trust you. White Zetsu's clone must stay by your side to monitor you. If you agree from now on, we will be allies. Kabuto frowned. He did have a plan, and it was nothing more than the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. Now that Dustless sent White Zetsu's clone to monitor him, it would be very inconvenient to take the Sharingan. No problem. After thinking for a while, Kabuto gritted his teeth and made a decision. White Zetsu's clone was just a rookie among rookies. When he took the Sharingan, he could easily kill him and then betray the Akatsuki. Moreover, Kabuto didn't intend to take the Sharingan now. Anyway, Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Sasuke couldn't escape from them. As for Dustless's Manjikyu Sharingan, Kabuto didn't think much about it. People must have self-awareness. He also realized that he and Dustless were aware of it, and even if he wanted to take the Sharingan, it would be in the future, not now. Happy cooperation. Showing a warm smile towards Dustless, Kabuto politely stretched out his right hand. However, unfortunately, Dustless didn't intend to shake hands with him. He directly ignored him, didn't even look at him, treated him like air. Who knows how many dead snakes he touched, how many monster experiments he did, Dustless didn't want to touch him. Damn Black Zetsu, sooner or later I will tear you to pieces. For the time being, I will let you live for 2 more days. The monstrous killing intent in his heart calmed down. Dustless secretly thought, Uchiha Madara's body has been kept by Black Zetsu, but this old guy gave it to Kabuto instead of his ally Dustless. As for what method, I'm afraid only ghosts know. This old guy wants Kabuto use Madara to suppress me, naive. Immediately understanding Black Zetsu's meaning, Dustless secretly sneered. I'm afraid that the reason why Black Zetsu gave Madara's body to Kabuto was to use it to deter Dustless. But he didn't know that the current Dustless was not afraid of Madara, and Dustless was not the fragile fledgling of the past. Even if he met Madara at his peak, Dustless could fight him. It seems that someone is coming, do you want to kill them all? The perception in Sage mode was naturally extremely strong, and Kabuto naturally felt that it was Konoha's ninja who came to support Team 10. Immediately he stretched out his disgusting snake head and licked his lips, which was particularly creepy. Of course, his line of sight faintly locked onto the 10th squad that was fighting in the distance, as well as Fei Duan and Kakazu who were fighting with them with all their might. His face was covered with frost that seemed to be isolated from the world, and his voice that was as calm as an ancient well resounded through the sky. Konoha's ninja, including Haiden and Kakazu, kill them all. Wu Chen's squinted eyes suddenly enlarged. His voice was full of murderous intent. His cold eyes were no different from a dead man's. There was no emotion that a human should have. Dustless did not have the slightest mercy to Kakazu and Haiden, as well as the members of Team 10 and Kakashi. According to his estimation, he didn't have much confidence in Mei. Until today he still didn't have confidence in Mei, and only by using force to pressure the Cloud Village to tell him where Mei went. Even Haiden and Kakazu are killed, what a cold man. Hearing this, Kabuto stared at Dustless in surprise. He didn't expect this guy to be so cold-blooded and even kill his own people. But soon he laughed strangely and said gloomily, if those 2 guys were killed by the people they usually look down on the most, their faces must be rich. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.